Generally, you said feminism is
neutral. Here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
the deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main method of politics, right? This is my ideology.
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool, Robert. Oh, they're dead? For a while, you say?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you a Moderator Monday on a Sunday evening. Just a little schedule accommodation, but also it kind of works out for me, and I am officially taking tomorrow night off. I don't get Monday nights off very often, but I'm going to take one. And I'm just going to take a brief moment to send a big shout out. I will say, Saturday morning, I woke up thinking, man, like, what if my show fails? What if I don't do this? What if it doesn't work out? And then later that day, we officially hit the 10K subscriber number. And I kind of, all of my doubts in myself, all of my thought to be failures that have not happened, just went to the side. And I said, wow, here we are. We did this. I can't believe we're here. So big shout out to all of you who subscribe, who watch. The Mater Nation is in the house, rocking, kicking, and I'm super excited we could have a show this evening to celebrate. Outside of that,
no.
Cheers to that. I'll cheers my giant cup of coffee to all of you fine Maters. I love you all. And thank you for being here with us to celebrate. This evening, I have Paul Ladix, I have Boons of Doom, I have Alex from Wi-Fi Gospel, and of course, I have Jeff Klein here to ask the question, is God's existence knowable? We will switch the opening statements around a little bit this evening, so I will clarify. Alex and Jeff are on the yes, so the more affirmative side of things, and Paul and Boons are on the no. But they're going to go ahead and kick off with their opening statements. Paul, to you.
Sounds good. Let me just get my teleprompter rolling because I have my opening statement on my teleprompter thing. So first of all, I really want to thank everybody for coming here, and I look forward to having a totally civil discussion about this topic. My very first debate panel, so I'm a little bit nervous. I want to open this debate with me and my partner's stance and what we're looking to get from our opponents. We're both arguing about God's existence from a strictly agnostic perspective. Neither of us are atheists. I've been actually getting attacked by a bunch of atheists for the past few days on my YouTube channel because I actually proposed the same arguments I'm going to be proposing to my opponents here. So go check that out after this. So I'm going to be going over three main points I believe my opponents are going to bring up and why I see them as fundamentally flawed. The transcendental argument for God and whether it has any kind of basis, the fundamentals of epistemology, and the problem with God and divine knowledge. First, I'll cover the TAG, short for transcendental argument for God, or I'll just call it TAG for the sake of simplicity. There are a few variations of this argument, but the general structure goes something like this. 1, knowledge, logic, and reason exist. 2, these things could not exist without God. 3, therefore, the existence of God, logic, and reason proves that God exists. The core of the argument is that God isn't just one possible explanation. He is the necessary precondition. If God didn't exist, then according to this argument, nothing would be known, no reasoning would be valid, and the logic itself would collapse. There are a lot of problems with tag, but let's start with the biggest one. Says who? Who says knowledge, logic, and reason can't exist without God? That's not an argument, it's just an assumption. This is a textbook case of the gods of the gaps fallacy. When someone doesn't have a clear answer to a deep question, like where knowledge or logic originates, they just insert God because they think there's no other option. But that's not reasoning. That's just plugging a gap in a belief. 1 second. My thing's scrolling a little bit too fast. So here's our challenge to our opponents. Why do we need an answer to this question at all? And if we did, why should God be the answer? Isn't it just as reasonable, if not more so, to say that the knowledge developed through centuries of trial and error, through observation, philosophy, and science? Why assume a transcendental supernatural being is behind it when human history shows a clear progression of discovery? The second argument I propose against the TAG is that this argument could be applicable to any religion which asserts itself as the foundation of knowledge. My opponents will inevitably say something along the lines of Christianity is the only religion which asserts itself as the foundation of knowledge, therefore it's true. But let me propose a counter argument to that. What if I took everything the Bible says, replaced it with the lore of the flying spaghetti monster, aka Pastafarianism, and asserted that as being the basis of all knowledge? It looks just as valid as their claim no matter how you look at it. And my opponents will say that the Christian faith is divinely inspired, well, so is the worshipping a pasta monster. It's just as divinely inspired as yours, and if we are to be as stubborn as my opponents, nothing they can say can refute the flying spaghetti monster. If unfalsifiable divine revelation is enough to justify truth, then congratulations. The flying spaghetti monster is just as real as the Christian God. Is that absurd? Well, that's the point. The third and final argument against tag is about what we even mean by knowledge. There's multiple kinds of knowledge, and I'm wanting to clarify which ones I'm referring to, and ask my opponents to do the same when they talk about God's existence being knowable. For instance, there's absolute knowledge, perfect, undeniable truth that can't be proven wrong, and supposedly withstands the test of times until the universe collapses. That sounds like the kind of knowledge my opponents will appeal to, unless they correct me. I, however, don't believe this level of certainty is attainable, especially considering our senses can deceive us. Just think about hallucinations, for example. Then there's empirical knowledge, the kind that's based off of measurable, observable reality, and it's the kind that I rely on when I say God's existence is unknowable. And after all, by their own admission, God exists on a wholly different plane from us, which means we can't measure, verify, or observe him in any meaningful way. There are other forms of knowledge too, but these are the two most commonly used in everyday conversation, so I hope these are the ones that we can stick to for the sake of clarity in this debate. My second argument against my opponents is that they, like most theists, and even many atheists, fundamentally misunderstand epistemology. There are three branches of epistemology relevant to this discussion: empiricism, rationalism, and foundationalism. Empiricism concerns data, measurements, and verification in material reality. Rationalism concerns logic, the interpretation and structuring of facts and theories, and it's the branch my opponents believe they're going to be using. My opponents believe they're going to be using for God, but in truth, they rely almost entirely on foundationalism, which holds that certain beliefs are self-evident and needs no justification. That is the core of their argument that God's existence is self-evident. We see this clearly in tag when they jump from knowledge exists to God is the only explanation, a massive leap with no causal justification. Even if you argue this holds up by abstract philosophical standards, the argument crumbles under the second it's subjected to scrutiny. All I have to do is keep asking, says who, and their framework begins to collapse. Instead of giving direct answers, they deflect into verbose detours about the laws of logic, which I'll remind you were developed by the Greek pagan Aristotle, not the Bible. And when it comes to verifiable claims like the existence of God, both empiricism and rationalism have to work together. You need data for logic to process. Without the raw material of evidence, rationalism is just empty foundationalism. That's where my opponents fail. They've got no methodology, but no content. And to make this even clearer, imagine a study on gender-affirming care that simply asserted surgery works without any data, just a methodology based on pure intuition. Would my opponents accept that as truth? Would they become pro-trans based on that alone? Of course not. So why should anyone accept their claims about God when they rely on the same kind of baseless methodology? If one is irrational, so is the other. And the last thing I want to touch on is God's epistemology. Where does God's knowledge come from? My opponents argue that God is the source of all knowledge and that knowledge must have a foundation. But what is God's foundation? If we truly wish to play the game of filling gaps of knowledge and find answers to everything, surely God's foundation for knowledge must be accounted for. So I do also ask my opponents, where does God get his knowledge from? Because it surely isn't us. Those are the top 3 arguments I'm putting forward against the claim that God's existence is knowable. What I hope to get from this debate are clear, direct answers to simple foundational questions. I know both theists and atheists tend to bury their points under verbose philosophical jargon, but me and my partner are here to cut through that. We're here for clarity, and we're betting the audience is too. So make me believe. I am all ears.
Thank you, Paul. Bones, to you.
All right. So I am Bones of Doom, a part-time political streamer, a part-time sandworm enthusiast, if you play Dune Awakening, and a part-time mediocre WoW player. The following debate discusses whether God is knowable. In the past, both Wi-Fi Gospel and Jeff both subscribed to the tag argument, which I expect them to utilize in this debate as well. On its own, the argument is logically valid, but there are a few issues with it, the way it is both utilized, as well as whether it is actually sound. In particular, I'm going to be debating on P1 of that, which is if the Christian God does not exist, then logic, morality, and knowledge are unintelligible, per the regressive form of that argument. The assertion that God is the only source of objective knowledge is self-defeating, as the validity of the claim depends on God's existence, which is already the subject of debate. Per the problem of the criterion, the theist answer to the question of how we obtain knowledge is divine revelation, which cannot work because it introduces a viciously circular argument of we know God exists because God revealed the knowledge of himself to us. Moreover, tag is not an argument that is exclusive to Christian theology, as my partner kind of demonstrated a little bit here. It means that this argument can also argue for the existence of other deities, whether existing, non-existent, or will exist in the future as a product of human minds, which entails the need for a discussion on why the Christian God specifically is knowable when compared to other deity concepts. The final point I'll make here is that the God concept described by Jeff and Wi-Fi Gospel cannot exist. The Christian God cannot be all of the following: omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, as well as a few other traits: eternal, transcendent, immanent creator, just, personal, immutable, sovereign. The most concise way to put this is that despite having all knowledge, limitless power, and who is perfectly good, God has somehow created an imperfect world that has allowed for the existence of evil and gratuitous suffering. In short, I do not believe that we can actually know whether the Christian God exists unless my opponents today can not only prove that a generic deity can exist, but that God himself can also exist and that he also holds all possible knowledge here. And that's it.
Thank you, Bones. And Alex, to you.
All right. So the existence of God is knowable because theonomous epistemology is the necessary precondition for the possibility of knowledge. Without God, you're left with autonomous epistemology. You start with yourself, using the necessary tools needed to gather knowledge, and then try to justify those tools by referring back to the very tools you are trying to justify. It goes like this. You're lost in the woods, so you pull out the only compass you own. It points north. To see if it's trustworthy, you shake it, lay it flat again, and look, it still points the same way. Theonomous epistemology is like this. Before pulling out your compass, you check the evening sky and spot Polaris, the North Star. You line the compass up with that fixed celestial reference, and when the needle disagrees with the star, you immediately know the compass, not the star, is off, and you adjust course. If there is a God who created and sustained the world and everything in it, a God who created us to know him, the world, and each other, then we can use our senses, reason, memory, testimony of others, etc. to know things. We can justify the use of our reasoning tools not by referring back to those tools, but by pointing to the creator of those tools. If you try to remove God from the equation, you end up in a vicious circle, unable to justify your epistemology. Here's how. If knowledge is possible, the existence of God is knowable. Knowledge is possible, therefore the existence of God is knowable. This is known as modus ponens. And what's the justification for P1? Either God is a necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge, A, or not A. It is not the case that God is not necessary, not A. Therefore, God is a necessary condition, A. This is known as a disjunctive syllogism, and it uses a valid inference rule known as double negation elimination, which is upheld by the law of excluded middle. Something important to understand is that I just made a positive case for the claim that yes, the existence of God is knowable. Now it's our opponent's job to try to poke holes in my argument. Not a straw man, not somebody else's argument, my argument. The only way they can do this is by showing that knowledge is possible without God. Let's quickly talk about how they will try to do this. They may appeal to empiricism and say we know things through our senses, but this assumes the reliability of the senses, which cannot be proven without using the senses themselves. That's circular. You're using your eyes to test your eyes. Or they may appeal to rationalism, claiming we know through reason. But again, this assumes that reason is reliable, and attempts to prove that using reason are equally circular. You're going to use your mind to validate your mind. In both cases, empiricism and rationalism depend on the very faculties they're trying to justify. Unless they can escape that loop, they can't offer a non-circular foundation for knowledge. Most likely, they will appeal to epistemic pluralism, claiming that no single source of knowledge needs to do all the work. That truth emerges from a web of methods, memory, intuition, testimony, perception, and so on. But pluralism doesn't solve the problem. It just spreads it around. If none of the sources can stand on their own, and each depends on the others for validation, then the system is just a loop of mutual dependence. You haven't avoided circularity, you just made the circle bigger. Remember my compass example? You check the first one, its needle settles on what it claims is north. After a shake, it still points the same way. You repeat the process with 3 more compasses, and each lines up with the other. At that point, you conclude, since they all agree, this must be true north. But all you've really done is assume that shared consensus equals accuracy. Even worse, let's say one compass points to a different north. How do you know which compass is right? Is it the 3 that agree just because they agree? Or is it the different compass because all 3 could have the same error? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And Jeff, to you.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for having us. And thank you, my opponents, for being here. Alex, always great to debate with you, man. Happy to have you as my partner. So I think they're going to be demanding for empirical data here, which I think is fair. The demand for provability assumes a standard, such as inductive reasoning and abstract thought. If they're denying God, then I have to ask them why nature is uniform, or why abstract thought reliably corresponds to reality. The transcendental argument for God starts with the undeniable facts of human experience. We use inductive reasoning, expecting the sun to rise tomorrow, and abstract thought, grasping mathematical truths. Hume's problem of induction shows that induction lacks a non-circular justification, as Alex points out. A purposeful, intelligent design grounded in God explains why nature is uniform and why human minds reliably align with reality. So my argument goes like this. The laws of logic are abstract, immaterial, universal, and necessary. Abstract, immaterial, universal, and necessary entities require a metaphysical ground. Only a necessary, immaterial, universal mind, aka God, can serve as such a ground. These function and exist as described, therefore God is the necessary, and God exists. And I'll leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen, all of you, for your opening statements. As a kind reminder to the audience, we will get through the debate, then we will move into closing statements. We will read and respond to your kind super chats that you send in during that time. And then afterwards, of course, our favorite part, we will go into open panel dumpster fire. So if you do have something to add to the conversation, you'd like to join the panel later, hang tight, stick around, and we'll be dropping that link in when it's time. All right, gentlemen, the floor is now open to you.
All right, Alex, I'm going to ask you a quick question right here. Did you utilize sense data to perceive God? I'm curious.
Locally, yes.
So by that, you mean you have imperfect data right here to perceive a being, right? How do I know that you're not fallible here?
Yeah, no, approximately yes, but ultimately the only reason we know we can trust our senses is because God created us to know Him and to know the world.
Something I want to get.
How do you know that?
Something I kind of want to. Oh, sorry.
Well, I'll just answer in this question. The contrary of the impossible, impossibility of the contrary.
And so, do you realize that there could be other deities that we could point to right here that could actually be the source of knowledge right here? Like I could say that Brahman, who's not a personal deity in any way, like we can go to the Hindu gods here, Brahman.
And the spaghetti.
How do I not know that he's not the foundation of all reality here?
And for this debate, that would suffice for the prompt.
So you would just deny the Christian God, and it would instead be the Hindu God.
I wouldn't deny the Christian God. I would say that either for this prompt would be plausible, and so therefore the prompt would be answered with a yes.
Something I want to make sure.
But you're arguing for Christianity here, the Christian God specifically, no?
No, not in this debate.
Okay. Yeah, Paul, you can go ahead.
I just wanted to set the frame real quick here. What do we mean by knowledge? Are we talking about empirical knowledge, absolute knowledge, some other kind that we might not be aware of, or?
I would say justified true belief is sufficient for this discussion.
So how do you know it's justified?
That what is justified?
How do you know that your belief in God is justified? Because the biggest issue that I have with the transcendental argument for God is that it presupposes God. You can't really do that to make it logically coherent. You know?
It doesn't presuppose God, right? It's starting with human experience, inductive reasoning, and logic. So we would, if you want to just call that knowledge, like mathematics and those types of things, that's what would be.
So
can you repeat
the
premises?
Know what a God is based off of any sense data that they have, or any perceptions that they have?
Can you repeat the premises for the tag? I'll just call it the tag for the sake of.
Well, it looks like we're having two separate conversations here. Let's make it a little bit ordered. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, Bones. If you looked like Bones asked Jeff a question. If you guys want to go down that line of reasoning, and we'll come back to us, Paul.
I didn't know if he was asking me or I got two questions.
I mean, I'm asking the both of you, really, like, or really, I guess Jeff in this case, but like, how do you know that the baby that was just born has knowledge of God at that point, then, or any deity for that matter?
It could probably make mouth sounds. You might not consider that like knowledge in a sense of making words and things like that. But that's
so in short, we can't know. Then is what you're saying. We can't.
The
really
baby
know
has a justified true belief in God.
I don't believe in justified true belief.
Well, would you define?
Your problems demonstrate that that's a absolute crock of shit.
I mean, what do you define knowledge as in this case?
Again, I would just look at like logic, spatio-temporal words, meaning.
You define knowledge. You define knowledge as logic, space, temporal,
like transcendental categories. That would all be knowledge. How we know we're here, how we know this is reality, how we interact with it.
Okay, so when it comes to the being that's on a whole other plane, the transcendental God, how do we know that though? How do we perceive it? Is it just revealed to you somehow, or
divine revelation?
And how do you get divine revelation?
You participate in the sacraments.
What?
You participate in the sacraments of the religion. So you pray and you go to church and this and that.
So
I've gone to church. I don't.
Go ahead, Paul.
I've prayed and gone to church for most of my life up until a few years ago, and I never got any kind of divine revelation. For instance, why is it only shown to some people and not others?
What got you out of it? Just out of curiosity.
Just kind of eventually fell out of it, to be honest. I kind of became agnostic for a while and then kind of came to where my position is now. I didn't think about God for a few years and then tried to believe in it again because admittedly I do have like a little bit of anxiety over the concept of death, but I just can't bring myself to believe it. And I can't bring myself to like not believe it at the same time, just because there's no proof one way or the other to be able to justify the existence of God or the lack of the existence of God.
Well, I would say again, like in this case, we could just use logic, for instance, would be a proof, right? That'd be a philosophical proof for God. I
No.
get you want something like empirical. A lot of people who pray and are earnest about it have personal experience. So we would call that testimony. That's usually the empirical data a theist would give to you.
The empirical data is praying.
So
No, I'm saying the testimony itself, like what the person went through that got them to God. Like you.
So do you both agree that God provides absolute knowledge, though? Or he's the source of it, rather?
I would say he's the source of it. I wouldn't say that means therefore we have absolute knowledge. I think as human beings, we're fallible. We can make mistakes. We can misspeak. This happens all the time. I have to take L's too, you know. I'm not a perfect being, right?
So then, in that case, you can never, for certain, prove that a God exists, then, or your God exists. Really.
I would say
that would be an absolute knowledge claim.
I think what Jeff's trying to say is that absolute knowledge within, say, realms of like empirical data. How do we know that we're on a Zoom call or a debate right now, right? We're not infallibilists in that sense, right? We could use fallibilism to understand that and to have first order knowledge. But what tag does is it shows the necessary of God by bringing it to the second order, right? So when you say things like, I know that we're having a debate right now, there's a second order claim smuggled in there that knowledge exists. Now, within autonomous reasoning, within autonomous epistemology, you can't escape the first and second order claims. You collapse them. So our question back to you is, how would you justify your epistemology?
Are you saying absolutely or to
in any way?
I mean, to some degree, to go back to like, I know I'm in a debate right here. I have previous knowledge that my sense data can relatively tell me like where I'm at in my room. I'm sitting at my desk. There's a camera that's on. I'm in a call with a bunch of people and we are discussing a certain topic. All of that leads to me to believe that it is most likely the case that we're having a debate. And so I'm engaging with it, knowing that there could be like a 0.0000001% chance that we're either in a simulation or like someone's playing me and I'm an NPC.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're using pluralism there. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. So even within pluralism, like you said, there are different things. You pointed to memory and perception.
Mm-hmm.
But when we separate them, right, because if you're using one to validate the other, when you're trying to validate perception, just using yourself, how would you do that without also using your perception?
How would I say that question again? Sorry.
Yeah. So just to put it in a different way, how would you validate your senses, that your senses are reliable, giving you reliable information without first using your senses?
I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't really like justify absolutely anything. Like, and I completely agree with that. But I also don't think that you guys can really do that either. I don't think you guys. I don't think you guys. You can always claim that. You can claim it, but you can't really prove it. Are you familiar with Munchausen's trilemma?
Well, before we move off,
wait. Are you familiar with that though?
I just yes. There's
okay. So
do
you understand that you can either end up in a circular argument, a regressive argument, or a dogmatic argument, correct?
Yes, and theonomous epistemology is.
So how does it escape then?
I just before we move on, are you agreeing that you were not able to justify your epistemology?
I cannot absolutely justify it. I can justify it to a sufficient degree to where it would be good for, or would be sufficient for all of us to understand that we're like
does
here.
A circular
I don't think
argument. Does a circular argument justify anything at all?
I mean,
it depends on.
I wouldn't say it's circular. I would say it would be regressive. I would just say that I would justify some things like ad infinitum. Like at some point it breaks down, but.
Could you show me how justifying your senses using your senses isn't circular?
How it isn't circular? I mean, that specifically could be, but I'm also talking about the fact that you guys also have, you guys are also utilizing your senses too. You're interacting with the world. I'm interacting with the world. And it's not just my sense data, but other sense data, and the fact that or not millions, but hundreds of other people are utilizing it as well. Like, of course, that doesn't escape like circularity right here, but I'm just saying that that's just something that I accept as a part of Munchausen's trilemma.
Something I do want to kind of bring up is the concept of, I think it's called the problem of the criterion, which is where does knowledge begin at a certain point, when it comes to something like our senses or our memory, it is inevitably going to become circular, because the best thing you could do is just point at our eyes and say, that's where we get our visual data from and stuff, right? The issue is, when it comes to the transcendental argument of God, you don't really have a starting point where you can point at how to justify God's existence. Does that make sense?
Yes, we do. It's a necessary starting point.
Yeah.
It's God.
Why?
Because without it, you fall into circular reasoning like you just did.
Well, yeah. And
so
is that
you
bad?
can also fall into circular reasoning with God. Like you just justify God.
Yes.
It's not.
Well, yeah, that's
making fallacious arguments bad.
God revealed to you that he existed. Like that. How's that not circular?
Because if he didn't, we wouldn't have knowledge.
Says who?
So the argument that I gave, do you have a problem with the premises? I can give them again if you'd like.
Yeah, we have a problem with premise one. That's what the entire debate is going to be.
Do you remember what my justification is? Just let me finish this real quick, and I'll send it off to you, Jeff. Do you remember what the justification?
Your justification is divine revelation. Like that's what you guys are arguing.
Was it the impossible to contrary?
It was a true disjunct.
True what?
So it was a disjunctive syllogism that relies on the double negation elimination inference.
Can you say that more clearly for the audience and us?
Let me pull it back up. All right.
No, I mean like break it down into layman's terms.
Well, that would be, if I was a great teacher, I'd be able to do that very easily. I'm not a great teacher.
I mean, you can do your best. It's okay.
A disjunctive syllogism is either A or not A, right? It's either or. It's like it's basically the law of excluded middle. It either has to be true or it isn't true. I would say that this disjunct, which follows the double negation elimination inference, which is basically you can, I have a definition here actually. The rule that from not P, one may infer P. It captures the classical principle that negating a negation restores the original affirmation and undergirds proofs by contradiction used throughout argument. And so the double negation elimination happens right here. Sorry, my notes are long. I'm scrolling back up.
You're good.
You're good.
Either God is a necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge or not. It is not the case that God is not necessary. So the inference there would turn around and say, unless you can provide a different necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge, then it's God.
Isn't there a third option, though, which is showing some intellectual humility and saying, I don't know, which is kind of my stance on it. I don't know whether God exists or not, so I can't have belief or disbelief. And I've argued with atheists about this before as well, by the way. So it's not like I'm a secret atheist or something like that, right?
Yeah, no, and I actually really appreciate that, because most atheists, you might like this term, are lack theists, right? So they kind of hide behind atheism, but I think I've heard it from Graham Oppie. I don't know if he coined the term, but they lack a belief, which is same thing kind of what you're saying, but you're actually using the better term, which is agnosticism. So I do appreciate that. But I would say I think we had a little bit of misunderstanding, because you're saying, well, isn't it more intellectually honest to say I don't know? The problem is maybe with God, sure, right? If that's where you want to take that, but it's not when it comes to knowledge, because saying I don't know that knowledge is possible would actually put you in a bad place. And I don't think you would say that, right?
Well, the prompt is God knowable? We're not talking about necessarily the start of knowledge. We're talking about whether God is knowable. That's a little bit of a different discussion, I think.
Well, that's the whole argument.
It's what Tag's trying to get a hold of.
Yeah, that God is the necessary precondition for knowledge.
Okay.
So if you were to say, I don't know that knowledge is possible, we could talk about that, but I don't want to strum in you, because I don't think that's your position.
I would say, what do you mean knowledge is possible? Like it exists, or?
Yeah, you can have knowledge. It's possible for you to have knowledge.
Okay, and knowledge is just justified true belief?
Correct.
And how can you not have that without God? Like, what if the entire universe just got created by accident? What if that impossible thing actually is possible?
Yeah, because if everything was created by accident, right? So accidentalism, then you wouldn't have intention behind the universe, right?
It'd also be astronomically impossible if you look into like physics, gravity, mathematics, all these things. They are so precise that it seems like it has intelligent design.
I would honestly
like
stay away from the ID argument right here, specifically because life is really inefficient, and two, like all sorts of like one negative. There's negative aspects of life where there's things that are harmful that have developed over the course of I guess the universe's existence. The fact that life seems to be pretty scarce as it is, and the fact that in a certain range within our solar system, there can only be like a habitable zone for beings to exist or for life to exist, and that even though we just so happen to be in that area, there's all sorts of places where that can't happen. And also the fact that the sun harms us a bunch with its radiation. Like there's all sorts of things where you can go down. I just don't think it's a really good argument to go down, in my opinion, but we can discuss that on a different time.
Since I just went off for a little bit, Jeff, I did say that we were going to come back to you on something, and we can put a pin in the knowledge argument. I'm sure we have most of the debate left. I'm sure we'll come right back to that. But there was something earlier you were saying. Do you remember?
I just wanted to address the non-circularity real quick, just so we can get out of that argument, at least on our end, because Tag avoids circularity by showing that denying God renders rational inquiry incoherent. So without a rational, purposeful God, laws become brutal fact, induction lacks justification per Hume's challenge, and free will undermines moral responsibility. The critics' charge of recursion misreads Tag's method, which justifies rationality by presupposing God as its foundation, not assuming rationality to prove God. I know that's a bunch of words,
and
hopefully get
the problem is that you only know this through like what God revealed to you. Like when I say that God revealed X to me through divine revelation, and I only know this because God exists, we could make the claim God exists because he revealed it to me. And at that point, that's where we get into the vicious circularity right there. That's my issue right there, is specifically with divine revelation.
But that's getting out of Tag. How we can access God is a different question than how we can know God, right?
Well, I mean, don't those two things kind of interchangeable in a way? Because the only way we can know
is because he has access to you, then that presupposes that he has access to you. Like that, you're smuggling that in. That's when I said in my opening statement that the argument on its own is valid, but when you're starting to smuggle in these terms here now it can't become valid because now you're sitting here assuming
you're
the conclusion.
asking a second order though, and if we're going into first order, God's existence, his nature exists, like knowledge exists, and then when we ask, well, how do we know that? We're moving into divine revelation and something. So we're moving away from Tag. We're not even addressing Tag. It's a different argument.
Well, no, you use divine revelation to make Tag sound, is what I'm saying. You're saying that P1 is true because of divine revelation.
No.
Or sorry, not P1, but that you're assuming the conclusion to be true.
Using human experience. So I'd be using the laws of logic.
Which you already agree that human experience is fallible, and in which case, like, how do we know that it wasn't, say, the devil talking to you in this case?
Could be. It's very possible.
So we can't really know whether it's God or the devil in this case. No.
Well, we can discern, right? If Satan was going to try and trick you, and theology taught you how, don't you think you could learn how to be untricked?
I mean, potentially, but either way, like we can take this further. Like if you go into the Bible, like what if the Bible was actually created not by God, but by the devil himself to, further entrench himself in tricking you?
That'd be a misrepresentation of the Bible.
And you would say that misrepresenting the Bible would be like in this case, I used to be Catholic, so I'm going to use those terms, a cardinal sin, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, we probably have some alignment. I mean, Orthodox Catholic, but
yeah, the first schism, not the weird Protestant schism.
Let me repeat the Tag real quick and see if we can kind of poke some holes into it real quick. So premise 1, knowledge, logic, and reason exist. Premise 2, these things cannot exist without God. 3, therefore the existence of knowledge, logic, and reason prove that God exists. Does that sound about right?
That may be, but I haven't gone into that specific one, so I would just use the one that I give.
Do you guys use either the progressive or the regressive version of tag? Because I've got the regressive version pulled up as well.
Yeah, so your P1 and P2 is actually just P1. It's if necessarily X, therefore Y, Y therefore X.
Yeah, I can give the progressive argument real quick because I think is that what y'all are using?
I mean, for me, I would just use the one I gave in my opening statement. If knowledge is possible, the existence of God is knowable. Knowledge is possible, therefore the existence of God is knowable, and then followed up with the disjunctive syllogism.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, there's a big leap.
Yeah, I think you guys are using the progressive argument.
I would use let's just necessarily Y. I'd use
okay. I would just say there's a big leap between knowledge and stuff exists, and then what was it you said? Since knowledge exists, God is knowable. Was that it, or?
Yeah, if knowledge is possible, the existence of God is knowable.
Well, but the issue is God is on a whole other plane of existence. So when we're talking about knowable, I set the frame with empirical knowledge. Let me try to get some sort of like agreement here, just so we can try to make sure we're all good faith. Can you agree it's not empirically possible to prove or disprove God?
I wouldn't say impossible, but for the purpose of this debate, since I'm not defending the Christian God, I wouldn't invoke Christ. So maybe empirically that way you could do it. So that's why I refrain from saying impossible, but I wouldn't say that tag is an empiric proof of God. No.
I'm not even speaking necessarily about the Christian God. I'm talking about God, any kind of cosmic designer that's out there. Can you empirically prove that there is something above our realm of existence that created everything?
Yeah, because it's a necessary precondition. So the very moment that you admit that knowledge exists, you have to justify that at the second order, and you can't do that without positing God.
It's possible that the universe could have always existed and that it was never created in the first place.
Okay, and how does that justify the second order of knowledge? Because you're still stuck in autonomous reasoning at that point.
Well, yeah, we're kind of going to be going into like circular reasoning and kind of pushing back and back forever, because then what created God, and whatever created God, what created that? And you could just go back and back forever. There are some things where I just think you have to show some sort of intellectual humility and be able to say, I don't know. And that's kind of the point that I try to get across to both theists and atheists.
Well, and kind of piggyback off of that, if you say that God is the necessary precondition, the God defeating hammer is actually the precondition for the universe, and that's what justifies all knowledge for me. Then, like, how do you square that?
Yeah, and I totally understand where you're coming from. This is a popular move that people use as an objection to tag. And what I would say, especially for the premise of this debate, you're turning this hammer into God and saying, well, it's not your God, it's this God that's the hammer.
It could be any God.
Well, for the purpose of this debate, I'm willing to grant that.
What are the properties of God then? I'm curious. Like, what do you think the properties of God are?
I came up with a definition of God for the use of this debate. A necessary and absolute universal mind that has created and sustains the universe. Because without that, you wouldn't actually have a God that could grant knowledge.
In that case, I could just say that there's some sort of machine that's created the universe and it doesn't require mind.
We could be in a simulation.
Yeah, and so how would that mind actually grant you knowledge?
That it's not a mind that grants knowledge. It's
the machine.
Yeah,
the machine itself. What it does is it provides us not absolute knowledge. I'm not saying that there are any absolute knowledge claims, but that we can through, again, you're going to have an issue with this, but our sense data, through that we can have a pretty good idea of what we're talking about here, or of what reality is. And we'll never, and I don't think you understand this yet, but we can't have absolute knowledge. That's my claim right there.
Yeah, I was about to
say an absolute knowledge claim.
Though.
I don't know that. That's the thing. I don't know that.
Maybe we can have absolute knowledge, but based on the
can't say that.
Well,
you can't say I don't know that we can't have absolute knowledge.
I don't believe that we can have absolute knowledge. Like it.
All right, so you're saying that you don't believe, and then you're also saying a universal. So which one is it?
I don't believe we can have absolute knowledge.
Are beliefs universal?
No, I don't think there's anything that I can say that's really universal per se, unless
we
could appeal to like the laws of logic being universal in like a classical sense.
So then the statement,
we just assume that to be true just because we all tend to agree that it's true for the sake of a conversation.
I just want to make sure
we all agreed, for the sake of argument, that God existed. Would it then therefore be justified to believe in his existence? Because most people do.
Can you repeat that question real quick?
Not necessarily, no. Like, I'm just saying that, like, for the sake of a conversation, we have to start somewhere in this case. And since we don't agree with that statement on this panel, we have to kind of hash that out. What I'm saying is that to some degree, like, if people are having a conversation, then it is a good idea to have a foundation. And at this point, going back to the trilemma that I was talking about earlier, you can either have an axiom that you can point back to as like the start for everything. You could either just justify things ad infinitum, like this, it justifies this, or you could go into like a vicious circularity, which is, and I'm saying that, like, that's why we can't have absolute knowledge, is that because everything has either terminates somewhere or it regresses into something that's not satisfactory.
Something else I kind of want to ask real quick is that none of us agree that we can have absolute knowledge, like unchanging, perfect, flawless knowledge. Is that something that any of us believe we are able to eventually obtain?
Us as humans,
yeah.
no.
Well, what was that?
Well, like you said, Jeff, with tag, you would say tag is absolute. It's absolutely true.
So you would say tag
that's one
is pointing to an absolute truth. Yes,
we're not infallibilists, meaning you can only know absolute truth, but there is some things that are absolutely true.
The way I'm understanding, I might be misunderstanding the question, but I don't think us as human beings can have absolute truth. I think we can have access to something that does through tag and God. So,
but then my
when you say knowledge of God is absolute,
know that it's absolutely true. Like, how can we know that the knowledge being provided is absolutely true without having to presuppose that there's an absolute giver?
Yeah, so we could look at the laws of logic. A thing can only be a thing, right? Can't have a contradiction, no exclude middle. That seems universal, right? And absolute. And it applies everywhere. It's not just in America, it's in the UK, it's in Africa. It seems to be something that even in Ethiopia, it still exists, right? It's still something that we can demonstrate.
Yeah, but also it doesn't necessarily imply that God kind of instantiated that. And at some point, because of human language and the fact that we're only able to parse so much information out to other people, at some point it all breaks down, is what I'm saying. It all has to break down somewhere. And where I see that your view breaks down is in the fact that you guys use divine revelation, or at least you do, Jeff. Specifically use divine revelation.
It is also a God of the gaps thing, because when we're asking questions like what started the universe and all this kinds of stuff, what could have created this perfect cosmic world, or whatever you guys say about like how everything's playing out and all like that, we just fill in God because it's like we don't really have another answer. And what I just kind of want, like I said with my opening statement, is try to get across the point, and maybe you guys can eventually agree to maybe lean more agnostic Christian or agnostic theist kind of thing, right? Like, I don't have any issue with the concept of believing in God or anything like that, but when you say it's knowable, I do just have to push back on that, just because of the fact that there's no way we can visibly see, measure, or verify anything that exists beyond our current material plane.
Well, and earlier in the debate, you said that we don't have to rely strictly on empiricism, but it seems like you just levied that as a standard against God.
Did I say that?
You know what? I think
you're looking at unverifiable, but that would also apply to morality and a bunch of things.
I'm an egoist, so yes, I agree. Morality doesn't really exist. So
maybe I misunderstood your opening, but would you say that we can
in Papua New Guinea then?
What was that?
I should tell you about an island in Papua New Guinea then.
I don't know. I don't know what you're referring to. I'm sorry.
Alex probably knows. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't have to go into that because we're not doing.
Yeah, that's a whole other debate for another day.
What we can probably say is that via empiricism, that's one way where it can fail. The other way that God can fail is through just what I'm saying is presuppositionalism.
Well, I wouldn't grant that God fails in empiricism. I would just say that within the empirical system itself, you're not going to pick up a piece of God and evaluate it. But
which means
to justify
which
the actual
makes them
system,
not falsifiable in an empirical realm. No,
well,
like, you can't really do that.
Maybe, but at a system level, at a meta epistemic level, when you're grounding empiricism as a whole, you can't do so without God, which is the whole argument I'm trying to make here.
But the problem is that now you're defining it, like empiricism specifically. It's not a perfect framework either, and you're saying that you're grounding imperfect frameworks with the perfect creator. I don't know how that squares.
Well, for example, we both have microphones in front of us, and we're using empiricism to understand that, at least in part. So I would say that empiricism plays a part in epistemology. It's not everything, but at the second order level, the justification of empiricism, unless you posit God, you can't do so. You're just stuck to yourself. So it's like my compass example, right? God is the North Star in that example. If you don't have the North Star and you're stuck alone in the woods with just a compass, all you can do is keep shaking your compass. And maybe if it lands in the same spot twice, then because it landed twice, you think that justifies that spot is north.
I mean, to kind of use that analogy, even the North Star is imperfect because compasses, the accuracy of them breaks down as you're reaching the North or South Pole here. Like there's like even the
I get that
analogy, like I don't think
any analogy is perfect, especially when it comes to something like God. No, I get it. Because I
was
was trying.
My brain kind of goes into this, like, oh wait, this doesn't work. Like I studied aerospace engineering, so like my brain is fucking like hardwired to like think of a bunch of like random bullshit. It could be like some sort of underlying autism that it hasn't been exposed to.
Autism is the new superpower.
Quick question for you: if it all breaks down, where does it break down?
What I mentioned earlier at presuppositionalism, I think it breaks down there.
Aren't you presupposing logic though, and reasoning to get there? To some degree, I would say that believing that the laws of logic are true would just be like an axiom that I hold, and that's just because, like you said earlier, that everyone else seems to be able to use it properly here. And I'm going to take the classical view right here and say that this is. I could say that this is universal potentially. Just real quick,
I'm not necessarily like beholden to that entirely, but for the sake of this, like we could say that it, classically speaking,
so if
the laws of logic are true and that it's always going to apply there, and that I'm justified in holding that belief because it seems to hold up everywhere else.
So if I say God's my axiom, where did I go wrong in my reasoning?
You would need to justify God, and where I said that it breaks down is that you're using God to justify God, which is viciously circular.
No, see, that's not understanding tech at all. I'm using
like that's a circular argument, though.
Are axioms justifiable?
Right? Can you read? Axioms are ultimately are a terminating like concept. Really, they just terminate where knowledge is at some point, because we can't really go further than that. At some point, it breaks down beyond that, and we can't really justify everything prior to an axiom.
Right. So if axioms are unjustified, then
you
can choose whatever.
They're unjustified in that, like, there's nothing holding them up beyond just holding that belief itself.
So they are the foundation. You can't really go under that. There's just a certain point where you just hit the wall, hit like the floor, and you can't really go any further than that. And that's just kind of parts where everybody kind of has their own subjective, unique axioms and stuff like that. So we're trying to get everything else regarding like God and stuff, because there's supposed to be a foundation for God. God can't be the foundation for God. And whenever you say stuff like God is necessary for the precondition of knowledge or something like that, I'm just kind of paraphrasing off the top of my head. That's just a case of the gods of the gaps fallacy, as far as I'm concerned, because it's like, you kind of have to have an answer for it. God is necessary because we don't have any other answer, because as you've said, the contrary is impossible or something like that, right? Is what you said?
I'm so glad you said that, because when I said that's interesting earlier, I was going to point out that that's exactly what you're doing with this axiom, these laws of logic. This is your own God of the gaps. You're saying, well, we have to assume this logic, this axiom, because we can't, like, it's just necessary. We have to.
assume.
So if I'm doing a God of the gaps fallacy, that would also be your God of the gaps.
It's not
what's
that
my
it-
God here?
For me, it's not that
Logic.
it is necessary. I just believe it is necessary because all of our conversations kind of necessitate that. So long.
I also don't
doing
use
that
logic
thing
as
again.
a.
Why do they have to?
Yeah, you're doing that thing again where you believe a universal. Universals aren't beliefs; they're necessary.
These aren't really universals, though. These are just our subjective opinions, which is why I'm agnostic. As I said, I'm not making any like universal claims. These are just arguments and logic that I have formulated against you guys for the tag.
So wait, if you're using subjective logic, why should I listen to you at all?
I'm not saying you should. I'm asking you questions.
Fair enough. I mean, fair enough.
In that case,
I'm not trying to change anybody's mind from being a Christian here. I'm asking questions about your foundation and stuff like that.
Yeah, just curious.
You can't get knowledge from subjective logic.
Who says?
Wait, what do you mean by knowledge in this case?
Yeah, that.
Like, do you mean absolute knowledge or like what?
Yeah, so just a justified true belief.
So just a justified true belief.
Right.
Do you
So
believe
if we all use subjective logic, then I can make whatever logic I want, and as long as my justification lines up with my made-up logic, then I have knowledge. So therefore, I know God exists based on whatever logic I want to use.
Doesn't it depend on who's justifying it, though? It's justified true belief. But what if your belief that you believe is justified is not justified by ours? That's why we're here, obviously.
Right. And that's why subjective logic breaks down, because you can't have two people with opposite knowledge and it both be true.
Yeah, and that's the entire point. Neither of us, I'm not claiming anything to be true. Again, I'm agnostic. I'm not an atheist.
So when you say no, God is not knowable, are you claiming that to be true?
I'm claiming that based on my current faculties that I have, based on the definition of empirical knowledge. If we look in the realm of empirical knowledge, which is what everybody basically uses to be able to garner knowledge as we colloquially use it, we cannot know God just because of where he's supposed to be, which is not with us.
And when you say we cannot, you're making a knowledge claim. You're making a universal knowledge claim. Now, if you want to back it up and just say, I don't know, that's a belief, right? Because you don't know it. So therefore it's a belief. Are beliefs aimed at truth?
I would say the closest thing to truth as possible.
All right. So you are saying
a belief
even
is
when you say belief.
a belief is a proposition, so it does have a truth value.
And belief isn't inherently rooted in fact either.
Well, if I believe there's a unicorn in my room, am I justified in believing that?
I mean, you'd have to give me the characteristics of a unicorn and then kind of demonstrate that it exists there.
As long as you have a subjective logic system that allows for it, then yes.
I think all systems or logic systems that currently exist are subjective.
Okay, so then I will create my own logic system that says everything is based on God. That's the first axiom. So the reason you chose, well, I don't have to because it's an axiom and it's subjective logic. Again, this is like an internal critique.
Then I could just reject the axiom then, is what.
Right, and
but
so
you don't
just reject axiom
classical logic, is what I'm saying.
As an axiom, yeah.
Okay, you have an extra presupposition of God at this point.
So there's a difference between presuppositions and axioms. Presuppositions can be necessarily true. Axioms are unjustified.
Well, yeah, you have to justify.
No. Presuppositions are unjustified. Axioms are justified to a certain degree.
Not at all. I don't know anybody who believes axioms are justified. You want to pull up a definition and show me? I'll concede, but
yeah, sure. Hold on.
Let me pull up a definition too. Now that I think about it.
Yes, axiom is statement or proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true.
Right. Self-evidence is not
all
justification.
Epistemic claims start with a presumption, so. Yeah.
So it can either be established, accepted, or self-evidently true.
Well,
so it doesn't necessarily have to be self-evidently true. What I'm saying is that it's accepted as being true. We all accept that that the laws of logic are true, that the law of identity, non-contradiction, and law of excluded middle are true. No?
Well, I don't accept that they're self-evidently true.
No, I never said they were self-evidently true. I said that we accepted that they're true.
So if we all accept something as true, it's true and justified.
We can accept it as true. It is something we all agree upon. That doesn't necessarily mean it is ultimately true, but that we all believe it to be true.
what I think is kind of the issue is that you're kind of forcing this into the realm of absolute knowledge when both of us have already said absolute knowledge doesn't exist. Like, again, kind of it seems to imply that based on what you're saying. Like, do you believe this to be true?
You keep pushing us into this realm of like absolute knowledge right here. We're not making those claims. We can only go so far with this. You still haven't like found that like foundation. You still haven't provided that. Whether it was Jeff using divine revelation, whether you're saying that it can't be otherwise, like we're not saying that our beliefs are true because it can't be otherwise. It could potentially be that there are some beliefs that can be true otherwise, but you're saying that it can't be on your view.
Is the law of non-contradiction a necessary precondition for knowledge?
Insofar as how we interact with the world, insofar as how we are able to get further knowledge, it can be like something that is necessary. It can be, but I'm not saying that it is or isn't.
Well, it depends on the thing, doesn't it?
I just accept it to be necessary.
Yeah, I feel like you're playing fast and loose with terms here. Saying you believe or you think something is necessary is not. You're saying I believe a universal.
I accept it as necessary.
So is it necessary or not? Can I have knowledge if the law of non-contradiction is not true?
Can you have knowledge if the law of non-contradiction is not true? If you've accepted prior that the law of non-contradiction is true, then you can't really have knowledge beyond after that.
Right.
Like
if I reject the law of non-contradiction, can I have knowledge?
Do you accept that the law of non-contradiction is true?
If I say no, hypothetically, because I do accept it as true, but if I say no, the law of non-contradiction does not hold. Can I therefore have
under my view, I would say no.
Right. So it is necessary.
I accept it as necessary.
Yeah, but just saying I accept it. So like I could just say I accept 2 plus 2 is 5.
Yeah, because I don't think
I'm not saying it's true. I just accept.
I don't think there's like something that provides objective knowledge. I don't think there's anything that provides absolute knowledge here. I'm accepting that it's true.
I just want to make sure. Are we going to stay in the realm of just
there is below that? Like I can't really know, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I just have to. Start
let me reframe
and build from there.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Are you still talking from the justified true belief definition, or are we talking more from the empirical, we can observe and verify position that I brought up?
Well, I
just want to make sure we're all on the same page here.
Empiricism can give you first order knowledge. I never denied that. But the second you say that there is such a thing as first order knowledge, you're implicitly saying there is a thing as knowledge, which is a second order claim. And what I'm trying to do is get you to justify the second order claim without invoking the first order. But because you're stuck at the autonomous level,
absolutely justify it.
No, I just want you to justify it without
then what do you mean
referring back to the first order.
What do you mean by justification then?
Give a reason outside of the first order.
So this just goes back into the Munchausen trilemma again. Like we're either going to have to at some point provide a circular argument or regressive argument or dogmatic argument, and that's the same thing with you guys. You still haven't been able to get out of that.
No, and
what I'm hearing, real quick, Jeff, and then I'll let you go. I just want to make a statement. What I've been hearing tonight is that logic is subjective. We don't really know anything. We just need to be skeptical about everything. And
as far as we know, logic is subjective. Yes.
And we just need axioms. And as if we disagree, we can't really have the truth of anything. But that's what I've been hearing tonight. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can't have absolute truth.
That's the entire point.
That's an absolute truth claim.
Not necessarily, no.
Can you define
and
absolute
that's also
truth claims? What is an absolute truth claim?
So saying you can't do something means it is not possible to do it, correct?
Based on our current faculties, yes. But it can change. I'm open to it changing.
Capable of doing this. And that's just because we are limited by our linguistic capability to formulate arguments. If there's some way that we can somehow create other ways to kind of communicate this that somehow escapes this, then sure, but that's currently outside of our current realm of knowledge, which is what I'm working on.
So saying it's impossible to have absolute truth is not absolutely true.
there could be a 0.00001% chance that it could be the case, but at some point, I'm just unlikely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Statistically unlikely. No, you're good. You're good.
Right, but I mean, if you have a 0.00001 chance of winning the lottery, does that mean if I buy a ticket, I can't win?
No, that's not
right.
What I'm saying that it is possible at some point, but it is highly unlikely.
Okay, so you would take back that we can't have absolute knowledge.
I'm saying that we cannot currently have access to absolute knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We can let's just rephrase it a bit to fit more of the context of discussion. Currently, with our current faculties and our ability to be able to perceive and verify things, we cannot have absolute knowledge. Could that change in the future? Sure. But as of right now, I currently cannot see a way we can gain that.
All right. But let me just press more on this. I don't want to get stuck on this, but just press. You're saying currently, with my current resources and abilities, I cannot have absolute knowledge.
Based on the current facilities that we have, I would say generally yes.
So with the current facilities that we have, there is zero chance, not 0.00001.
I would say 0.001 maybe. It's a thing where it's like, I don't have an answer generally, but this is my current belief based on my current knowledge.
Right.
Because we're still operating within the realm of our own knowledge. And I'm not like a philosophy major or anything, to be clear.
But when you invoke, neither am I, I'm a high school dropout. But when you invoke that word can't, you're implying impossibility, which is an absolute. Even if you say currently.
We're talking more like colloquially. Can't as of right now. And I would say that's generally pretty verifiable, honestly.
Honestly, like at the end of it all, what I'm saying is we only really have our subjective experience to go off of. That's it. Like that is the sum of all of our ability to be able to perceive things and be able to manipulate reality to find new knowledge claims, to come up with moral claims, to come up with anything really. We're only limited to that at the moment. We don't have access to other people's subjective experience.
Yeah, I do want to say that it's very pleasant talking to both of you.
Yeah, you guys are good faith. I love it.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. And I want to make sure, because it looks like we have about 30 minutes or so before Sarah gets us into our closing statements. And I want to make sure that at least from our end, right, that we accomplish something here, which is to make sure that I'm saying my arguments clear and also that you're understanding them, not because of any fault of your own, but because of me. So can you try to steal me in tag in the way that I gave it so I make sure you understand it?
So I'm going to go off the regressive form of the argument just because I have it written down. Or actually, I have both. So what you're saying is that in order to have any sort of knowledge, that it presupposes that something is available to give that knowledge. And in that case, what you're saying is that there's some being that exists, whether we are able to perceive it or not, that provides that. And according to you guys, there can be a multitude of ways where that can be like garnered from. Yeah, is that good enough?
I think that you definitely hit some truths in there and represented it properly at some points. I think the first point, saying that to have any knowledge, you need to have revelation from God, or I would say that I granted first order knowledge, right? Like empiricism could tell us that this microphone is in front of our faces, but I'm bringing it up to the second order, which is where the disjunctive comes in. If you don't have God as the necessary precondition, you're left with yourself. Which is where you're right. Munchausen's trilemma. Is it Munchausen?
Munchausen's, I think. Yeah.
Is it also known as Agrippa's trilemma? Is that also? That's the way I've heard it, but I could be wrong.
I don't know actually. I've only heard it as Munchausen. Oh, Agrippa. Yeah.
And so all of these things, I mean, Gettier's problems, Gettier cases, all of these things philosophers have been talking about are right. And I think that that's because we're stuck in autonomous epistemology. So I just want to, again, repeat the argument, go back to the syllogisms, and I want to find out exactly where you disagree, because I want to make sure I understand the point that you're trying to push on. The first one, I should have this memorized by now, but Jeez. If knowledge is possible, the existence of God is knowable. Knowledge is possible, therefore the existence of God is knowable. And the disjunctive that follows up, usually connected to premise 1, where most people don't like that. Either God is a necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge or not. It is not the case that God is not necessary. Therefore, God is a necessary condition. Where in the premise is the problem?
So we could go back to this. We can just treat a double negation as just the positive claim, correct?
In a sense.
So God is necessary because he is necessary. That's where it kind of simplifies to.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to say that that's a tautology, you would also have to say that the law of excluded middle is a tautology. But in classical logic, double negation elimination is a valid inference.
Yeah, but it's also just tautological too. I can also agree that the laws of logic are tautological too, and we're still kind of in the same place. I would in that case I wouldn't absolutely like if I were to like take the theist view on this, I wouldn't absolutely know that God is revealing that knowledge to me in that case, just because it's tautologically true, and I could effectively put it on the same pedestal as an axiom in that case. I could.
Right. I would grant that to you if you take the view that you're taking that logic is just axiomatic, but I think that gives us huge problems.
Like what?
Like for example, if you want to go back to it, axioms are unjustified. That's what they are. The axioms of algebra.
Yeah, I can agree that they're ultimately unjustified, but the level of justification that they have is just because most people's, or really all humanity's sense data seems to validate this in that it tends to work for everyone.
Sounds like a justification.
I have to put back on the nose for everyone because, like, even though 2 + 2 = 4, and we all agree to that, do you think it's a good reason that I say I found that out because Barry Manilow told me in a dream? Like, it kind of pushes into like a ad populum for me.
I mean, yeah, that at some point, like these views just break down is what I'm saying. Like what I just referred to effectively can become like an ad populum fallacy right there. And what I'm saying is like that could be done under like any theist view really. And it can really, if I just take the laws of logic to be axioms, like at that point, it does also become an ad populum fallacy. Like
something I do want to do. I just want to make sure, because I really am not like super well versed in philosophy. An axiom is basically just like a foundational belief or something, right? Is that kind of what it is?
I can give you the definition again. It's a statement of proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true.
Okay. So something else I wanted to go to, which was in my opening statement, is the concept of God and his divine knowledge, because you guys have a point in pushing us on like going to the very beginning, our very foundation, and justifying it. But then we have to also look at where you guys are and talk about where God gets his knowledge, which is where it starts getting in the weeds. And this is where I would be pushing both theists and atheists. As I said, there has to be a beginning somewhere, but it's just currently it's really difficult to know, or we can't really know. We can't verify or measure it because of the very nature of God. Do you guys have any kind of foundation for where God's knowledge comes from?
From God.
Yeah.
Isn't that circular?
He is the foundation of all knowledge.
God is the foundation of God.
So really, tautologies are validity at some point, because if you're going to go into the very micro meta, at some point we do have to just say A is A, right?
Well, yeah, that's kind of the same thing for us.
It's just a limit in logic.
But again, because of Hume's challenge of induction, I would just push back on this. If you're going to start with empiricism and say we have knowledge because it seems that way, like I can see that I'm wearing a hat and I can see that there's a microphone in front of me, therefore I'm justified in believing that I'm wearing a hat and there's a microphone in front of me. The issue is that when you're starting with empiricism or naturalism, it doesn't seem to give a good justification or grounding for universal truths. And that's where we push back and say, well, if these are uniform in nature, don't we think that there would be something outside of us that put these into motion? Think of
So
yeah, there could be. It's just that we have no evidence for or against that is the thing. Like, again, you kind of just, you can ask somebody questions over and over again until they get to the very basis. And then eventually every single person, no matter who it is, it's just going to have to say it's self-evident or we don't know. That's kind of what I'm trying to get out of you guys. Like, after a certain point, when we keep asking you questions, like you said, God's foundation for knowledge is God. At a certain point, it inevitably becomes circular and self-evident, right?
I would say no, because necessary preconditions aren't the same as saying that something is self-evident. What does self-evident even mean? It just means that you think it's true.
Yeah, like believing in God.
That doesn't really do anything for me.
And
Just to say-
kind of go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And to kind of go back to Jeff's claim about empiricism, I don't think any empiricists necessarily claim that there's like an ultimate foundation to like their knowledge. And in this case, when we're talking about, let's go back to science here. Let's say we're trying to measure something. Let's say we'll use a ruler as an example, and we're trying to figure out how long this, we'll say that this little screwdriver is. There are some tools that have low resolution that could get you to maybe like the 1/8 of an inch. And as you go further and further, you introduce new materials, you introduce marks that are much closer to each other, and you can get to say like 1/28 of an inch. And at some point, like our tools can get a little bit more precise, and we can kind of converge onto a certain value of how long that screwdriver is. But at some point, it breaks down. Whether it's temperature differences, changing the length of the material, and both the screwdriver and the ruler that we're using, humidity, et cetera, like there are limits to knowledge. And at some point you can't really like factor it all out. And there's some level of uncertainty in there. And I think most people would just accept that.
The pushback I would have in all of this is to say, when we're engaging in tag, we're even asking how words have meaning and going into the ontology of words itself. And so you're already granting yourself a bunch of categories there that tag's trying to demonstrate. So how are you proving a self? How are you proving that you're having experience in spatial temporal? How are we getting to these things without just presupposing them? And that's why I guess, you know, a lot of people get upset with tag because it's very, very super meta. It's like the
answer I would have is ultimately like I don't know, but what you're doing is you're adding in an extra clause here that God is what gives the knowledge right here, and there's like a certain term for it, but the least amount of like premises and presuppositions or whatever is going to be more likely to be true than not. I forget the exact term for it, but what I'm proposing here is that there at some point we don't know something, and I'm not saying and at some point things terminate here, but you're saying that it doesn't, and that there's an additional premise that requires that there is something that provides that termination that is satisfactory. And I just wouldn't grant that, and I would say that it's less likely than just not knowing. Yeah, I could rephrase it if that didn't make sense, but
if there's something else you wanted to get to too as well, if not, I have something we could go on for the last few minutes.
I was gonna do a quick demonstration.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead. I got write it out real quick.
Well, I just wanted to, because I don't know, maybe I misremember, but I don't know if you gave a clear answer on this. Would you say that knowledge exists?
Even
in a fallibilistic sense.
And if I would say that fallible knowledge would exist, but at some point I would just say I wouldn't know that absolute knowledge could exist.
So then you would say something like, I don't know that knowledge exists?
I don't know that ultimate knowledge exists.
What do you mean by exists? I feel like maybe we can end up going on two different pages here if we don't define something like existing.
Right, and maybe, yeah, I mean, that's what all philosophy is about, right?
Yeah.
What is real, man?
Nothing's real, man.
I would say a better way to put it is probably, is knowledge possible? Like the attainment of knowledge.
I would say in a fallibilistic sense, yes, we can have access to knowledge. Like we can say like whether like other panelists would agree or disagree, but we can say that things like evolution is true insofar that we have observed it occur over millions of years, whether through geology, whether through paleontology, or whether we just like study bacteria culture.
Cool.
But it's like there are other, like let's say like abiogenesis, like the formation of life itself, like we have no clue about, and we don't know the minutia in evolution to some degree, but we can still say that it's generally true.
Have you ever heard of something called the KK principle?
I've not.
So the KK principle, and hopefully I don't butcher this. I'm sure somebody will super chat me and tell me I did. That's fine. But it's basically the idea that in order to know something, you have to know that you know it. I don't agree with the KK principle, and many philosophers do not agree with that. So that's not what I'm doing, right? And that's why I grant first order knowledge. I don't think that you have to know that you know in order, or that you have to be aware that you know in order to know something at the first order. But I do think that the second you say that knowledge exists, or that fallible knowledge even is attainable, you're moving to the second order. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that is where I'm trying to say, because getting into like the circularity of empiricism and all of that, which you seem to agree with, and you're trying to just say it's not a big deal because everybody has to do it, is kind of where I'm getting your argument. I'm trying
to engage with it at some point. I hold Munchausen's trial limit to be like true in this case. Like, I think it does terminate in like a circularity.
Right. But with God being the necessary precondition, could you see how I don't have to invoke a first order knowledge claim to justify the second order?
How so? But yeah,
right.
How so?
Yes. So like with empiricism, when you say knowledge exists, and I say, how do you know knowledge exists? You say, because my senses tell me they do, if you were an empiricist. That's invoking the first order to justify the second order. With God, it's saying, I know that knowledge exists because God is the precondition for knowledge. So it's out of the circle. It's recursion. It's not circularity.
So that would just be another part of the trilemma. Then you just say that it recursively is true. You're getting into the regressive argument at that point.
No, because I'm not invoking that first order claim.
I don't think you need to. You just said it was recursive. No.
Yeah, maybe I'm not using that term correctly, but what I'm trying to say is that with autonomous epistemology, you're not invoking a first order claim trying to prove the second order. Whereas with autonomous you are. With theonomous you're not, and that's why it gets out of the dilemma.
Well, the what in this case would be God, no?
Right.
Yeah, so you are invoking the first to prove the second.
No,
you're just saying
God isn't a first order. Yeah, God isn't a first order knowledge claim.
No, God exists as a first order knowledge, or really, God gives access to knowledge. Well, that's second order.
Yeah, we're saying it's God's nature of being the second.
And then you're saying that God provides knowledge. God provides knowledge is the first order claim then.
Right. And something that I've even done myself, right, because I'm still learning, right, we're all still learning, is that I would try to say that just basically admit hard solipsism on everything except God's existence, right? And that's how I would argue. And that's just not helpful. And it's just not true.
I wouldn't think that God escapes hard solipsism either. So.
And I get into trouble doing that. But hopefully I've learned from my mistakes in the past. Now, where was I going with this? I agree that empiricism is true to an extent, just like you do. I agree that fallibilism is useful, right? Like, if we're off this debate and we're just talking, we're like, man, yesterday I went to the store. I'm not saying like, oh, like, how do I know I went to the store? I could be wrong. No, I know I went to the store, right? So I agree to all of that. What I've learned, though, is that the problem is much deeper than that. And that's kind of where I'm trying to get at with all of this.
Yeah, and I don't think we're probably getting close to the end of the hour and a half mark here in about a few minutes, but
You're fine. Usually we actually go to the full 2 hours for the debate time frame. Yeah, so if you still have some more to prompt out of that, we could do that. Or if you do want to kind of close that thought and then we can go into open panel, I'm happy to do that as well. But I leave it all up to you guys. Yeah, I think the conversation is great. I think you're having a wonderful discussion and getting somewhere with it. So it's totally up to you.
Yeah, I was going to demonstrate real quick. So there was a claim that tag is adding in a premise. So I'm writing it down. And you'll have to forgive me. My handwriting sucks.
I'm not saying that the claim that I'm making is not adding a premise. I'm saying that you are in this case. That you guys are adding in a premise on top of tag.
Where is it?
You got to focus it.
Yeah, I can't see that. I'm also glasses, so I'm kind of blind.
That's not gonna work, is it? If necessarily, if possibly.
But I have tag pulled up. I mean,
so our empiricism is obviously stronger than your guys. I mean, we're not wearing glasses. Just
oh wait, holy shit! Actually,
so you could always like write it in the chat, maybe, and I don't know if that will help. But
I'm just looking at my opening
or pull it up on if you put it up on like a Word document, we could like share the screen like that.
I have both forms of the argument. I can just exit full screen. I can throw that in there.
Your first mistake was using a notepad. You need a slow boy whiteboard.
There you go. I need a slow boy whiteboard.
Cool.
I mean,
I'm not on Jay's level yet.
So. Grab a whiteboard, but yeah.
Is this what you want to pull up?
Yeah, whatever I just sent into chat. Either the progressive or regressive form. Either way, like I understand that the tag argument itself is logically valid, and I think no one's going to really disagree with that unless they're
yeah.
But what we're saying is that you guys are adding in you're implicitly or explicitly adding in a premise that God provides that or God exists. You're just assuming that the conclusion is true in this case.
Well, then that wouldn't be valid, would it?
Yeah, that argument wouldn't be valid, but the tag argument in of itself is logically valid, just not sound, in my opinion.
I don't understand. Are you saying that implicitly we're actually making a different argument?
That implicitly, yes, you're adding in that premise, and that you're making a different argument based on that premise.
Can you show me in my syllogism where I have that premise in?
When you say that God is necessary because he is, that just ends up being a tautology. P is P. In this case, it would just be asserting P as the premise.
Right, but if I was doing that in my syllogism, it wouldn't be valid. Could you show me where I'm putting it in there? Like, where's the premise that I have? Because I understand what you're saying. You're saying like you're saying you're actually making it. You're sneaking in a. Go ahead.
No, you finish your statement.
I was going to say, like, do you think I'm sneaking it? It seems to me that you say that I'm sneaking in a premise, and I'm just trying to figure out exactly where.
Yeah, me too.
Well, when I say sneaking is like a colloquial thing, but you're either explicitly adding it or implicitly adding it. In this case, you explicitly added it. In this case, you're just saying that P is true because P is true.
Well,
and
no,
it's tautologically true.
So would you say then that all modus ponens is circular?
Modus ponens, yeah, it would terminate should P be true, or P be assumed to be true. In this case, like it's valid,
right? And if it's
I'm not saying that all of like modus ponens arguments are sound either necessarily.
Right, soundness and validity are different, right? For the audience sakes, valid means that if the conclusion follows from the premises. Sound means that the premises are also true. So, but what I'm trying to figure out is you're saying it's circular, but you're also saying it's valid. But if it was circular, then the conclusion wouldn't follow from the premise.
I'm saying that it's tautologically true. Like it's that case, it's recursive, not circular.
I mean, that would mean just everything is tautologically true.
At some point, most claims, or really all claims, would break down into like tautological claims.
So if all claims are tautologically true and my claim is tautological, what's the problem with that?
I mean, the problem is that it's not a satisfactory answer, really.
So
I don't consider it to be satisfactory because at some point, like there's no real termination point. It just is because it is.
So if my claim is like all claims, then all claims wouldn't be satisfactory.
Yeah. I don't see I don't see.
So,
and honestly, my problem differs here, or where that problem would be different than any other claim.
Yeah, I forget exactly who said this, but it was some presuppositional apologist, and he basically said this is the way you defeat, or maybe he was an atheist. I forget. Anyway, what he was saying is the way you defeat tag is being the ultimate skeptic. Nothing is true, not even the statement that nothing is true. The problem is nobody actually believes that.
Yeah, nobody believes that to be true, but what I'm saying is at some point we have to accept certain things as true, or else we devolve into complete skepticism, which is why I'm saying that we eventually have to appeal to dogmatic arguments, or in this case, axioms. Like we have to appeal to something to ground it. And I'm just saying that in this case, we're not saying that it's necessarily God that's grounding it, but probably some set of axioms
something popped in my head about axioms I'd like to ask. What mechanism do you use to determine which axioms you should hold?
What do you mean by mechanism?
Even just reason. Like, what reason do you use to determine which axioms you were to hold? Because, like Jeff said, if he said that God is his axiom, you wouldn't hold that axiom. So there's a reason why, right?
I mean, I would justify axioms at some point. Not ultimately, but through, I guess, sense data and kind of repeatedly testing them throughout my life until I'm able to kind of develop the concept of an axiom. How do I get to this point here? Like, let's say, like how do you know how you can kick a soccer ball, whether it be kicking it forward or curved or like chipping it up? That sort of thing develops over time. You develop the techniques right there through sense data, and at some point you get a little bit better at it when you practice it and you apply it in other situations. Going back,
where would the axiom be in that analogy?
The axiom would be, and it would be the foundation for like choosing where the ball kind of goes. It would be in how you position your foot in this case. There are certain ways where you'd position your foot to achieve like that result in this case.
All right, and so my question, the reason I asked that is because my question is, what's the reason for where you want the ball to go, right? That's the axiom. The axiom is I want the ball to go here, X. I want the ball to go in direction X. And you're saying direction X is the axiom. I'm saying, why do you want the ball to go in direction X? What's the reason for that, and not direction Y?
I mean, because it achieves some sort of like ultimate purpose. In this case, it could be to push the ball forward and or to pass it to a teammate, or to do otherwise. Like that ball moving sets up other people to move a ball. And
so then, wouldn't that then become your axiom, because axioms are the bottom foundation?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. So then when you say that the laws of logic are your axiom and they're justified by sense data, what you're actually saying is sense data is your axiom.
I mean, to some degree, the reliability of sense data or the relative reliability of sense data could be the axiom, or really, I guess the claim could be I take sense data generally to be reliable.
Right. And so do you see the problem there where now I can just push you on the sense data axiom? You're going to give me another reason or mechanism to tell you why that should be your axiom. And now you have a new axiom, and we just keep on going and going until really you can just have any.
We could do that to anybody. We could do it to an atheist. We could do it to a theist. We could do it to us. And you have been showing it works. But I think that can apply to you guys at one point or another, especially when you do end up going to when we were talking about the divine knowledge thing, God's foundation for knowledge comes from God. And then we just kind of go in the same path in the other direction. That's kind of sorry.
No, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
That's just kind of the issue with like these kinds of debates. Both sides, it it really kind of depends on who's able to assert and ask more questions, and then the other side just looks weaker, because at a certain point you can ask somebody so many questions before they just get to it's self-evident or I don't know how to justify that. That's kind of like the issue with these kinds of debates, and I've watched enough to be able to just come to the conclusion that I don't think it's knowable. And I think both me and Bones here can acknowledge that at a certain point, our axioms and our foundation is either just self-evident, like through sensatory data, or we just can't really know after a certain point. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're saying it is what it is. It sounds like you're saying the existence of God isn't knowable because nothing is knowable.
Well, it depends on how far you're going with knowable. Are you talking absolute knowledge? Because as I said in my opening statement, I don't even think our sensatory data can do that, because we do hallucinate. We do have various malfunctions with our five senses. So even that isn't entirely reliable. When I say something like knowable, I'm just talking like generally colloquially speaking. Can we measure and verify it with our current faculties and forms of measurement?
I think this is a great way to go out, because you're saying, when you say, can you give me then an example that you would accept as knowable, something?
I would say, well, again, it just really depends on how you define knowable. If we're talking about the colloquial general usage of knowable, then I would just say looking at my teleprompter here is knowable, just because that's what I can verify with my current faculties. If we're talking about something that's going to be absolutely true and hold to the test of time, I'm not sure that's necessarily obtainable, at least right now.
Cool. So then in that would go back to an axiom that is either subjective or unjustifiable, right?
Yeah, at a certain point, as I said, there's just a certain point where it's either self-evident or you can't really justify it because you kind of think it just is. Just like with God, just like with the transcendental argument of God kind of thing. It just kind of gets to that point.
I think
you're saying,
it's the problem in the criterion.
Finish this line of logic real quick.
Go for it.
So what you're saying is the screen in front of you, the existence of it, or you knowing that it's there, is the thing that's knowable, even though it relies on an axiom that is at the ultimate level unjustifiable or unknowable or subjective. But by your own standard, as long as I can say that God exists and I base it on an axiom that I can't justify, that is ultimately unknowable, then I have completed the prompt that just like the screen in front of you, his existence is knowable, God's existence is knowable by your own standard.
I'm sorry, can you... I kind of like lost a little bit in the midway. It's a little bit late where I'm at.
I would disagree, because I even think that my own like axioms aren't like ultimately like satisfactory either, and I don't think that the claim that God can be justified by axioms is satisfactory.
Yeah, we are always learning after all.
Since you and I both we all agree that Munchausen's trilemma is true, like at that point you would also have to say that it is not a satisfying conclusion.
But then you would also have to say, at least according to Paul's example, that the existence of the screen in front of you is not knowable. It's not satisfactory.
Yeah, it's ultimately.
Well, yeah, it just depends on how far you go with knowable. I would say general certainty, not absolute, because I could be hallucinating right now. I could be in the middle of a room in like North Korea or something like that, right? I don't know that for like absolutely certain, but based on my current what I have available to me, my five senses and stuff, being able to touch it like that, I believe it to be generally believable that there's one right in front of me.
I can say
I'm using these words a lot more specifically because since we're talking in the realm of philosophy, something that I probably messed up a little bit with earlier on my part is trying to use these words more colloquially.
I understand. And I'm just trying to go based off your own definitions. And if I could, Bones, if you would like to do this as well, could you give me something that is knowable?
Something that I would say is like knowable to the degree to where like we can operate normally and not have to kind of be ultimately skeptical. Let's say that like a tree in a park exists. I experience that tree through sense data, through tactile, like feeling it. I could even like smell maybe the pine cones that come off of it. Other people are also going by it. They also smell it. And over time, enough people are able to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, experience it. And at some point we can kind of accept that that is a tree, and that, let's say it's a pine tree too, since I'm mentioning pine cones, and that, let's say after like 1,000 people pass by that park and they pass by that pine tree, one person passed by the pine tree and they're like, I smell pecans. That doesn't make it a pecan tree at that point.
Right.
They could just be mistaken necessarily. And of course, like at some point, all of our sense data kind of breaks down and it can't be ultimately reliable, but
it is knowable.
It's practically reliable, I'd say.
But that tree, the existence of the tree in the park is knowable.
Yes.
Okay. And the underlying axioms, maybe there are multiple, but one of them is that sense data is generally reliable.
Yeah, it's generally reliable. I'd agree.
Right. So then so if you're saying the tree in the park is knowable, even though the underlying axioms are, would you say subjective? Would you use that term? How would you say unjustified? What would you say?
I would say that ultimately, at the end of the day, the axioms that we base our like knowledge on would be subjective.
Okay. So now I have an axiom. My subjective axiom is that God is the necessary precondition for knowledge. This isn't my position. I'm just using it as an internal critique.
Sure.
By your own standard. God is the necessary precondition for intelligence, for knowledge. That's my axiom. I have knowledge out in the world. Therefore, and based on my axiom, I can know that God exists based on that knowledge. Even though my axiom is ultimately subjective, you would still have to concede that God's existence is knowable in the same way that the tree in the park's existence is knowable based on your own standard.
And then what do you base that axiom on? Or
it's just subjective.
It's subjective at that point, but what is it subjective to? I think is the question.
Well, just the same thing that your axioms are, yourself.
You're saying that by using your sense data, you're able to prove,
because your axiom is sense data.
So how do you go backwards from knowledge to your axiom God in this case?
Right. So my axiom is that God is the necessary precondition for knowledge.
But how do you get from your knowledge to God as the axiom?
Well, I go out in the world and I know things, right? Other people tell me that I know things. We all know things. And then based on that, I go back to my axiom that's subjective. And if we know things, then the necessary precondition for that is God. So therefore God exists. In the same way that sense data being generally reliable as your axiom is, you go out, you say, okay, well, this person says there's a tree, that person says there's a tree in the park. We all agree that there's a tree in the park. Therefore, my senses can give me knowledge.
How
go ahead.
How I would say that is, it could be the best rebuttal I could give to this at the moment is that when I say that like the knowledge that I have is practical right here, how is it practical that God is the necessary precondition for knowledge in this case?
Well, you're moving the goalposts, because if axioms are subjective, they don't need to be practical.
How so? Cool. Well, I'm saying that the axiom right there, it can be used it can be used practically to kind of help me navigate through life.
Right. So yeah, because it can give you knowledge ultimately. Saying your sense data is generally reliable grants you knowledge. Saying God is a necessary precondition for knowledge grants me knowledge. It's practical in the same way.
How so?
Because we need to use knowledge to operate in the world. If we don't know things, we would never be able to actually do anything because we would be unsure. We wouldn't know things.
And God being the necessary precondition does what in this case? It just provides that foundation, is what you're saying.
Right. And frankly, it doesn't need to have practicality if it's subjective. I could subjectively believe that unicorns I could have an axiom that says unicorns make my sense data reliable. It doesn't have to be practical.
But how does that become like an ultimate source of of knowledge in this case, or an objective knowledge claim, since you claim that.
Because that's not my argument. I'm trying to do the internal critique, right? If you're just rejecting this objective knowledge, if you're rejecting that, if you're saying axioms are self-evident, unjustifiable, or subjective, then this is the problem we have. Which, look, it's fair because I think epistemic nihilism is the only way to defeat tag, but we all know that epistemic nihilism is not the way to go.
But I guess in that case, like I would just have to say that it would just be recursive at that point.
In yours wouldn't?
Yeah, mine is recursive.
Right. So it still answers the prompt that God's existence is knowable, unless you're saying it's all recursive and nothing is knowable.
The problem is you claim that he is absolutely knowable in this case, no?
In your realm standard, it wouldn't have to be.
Well, I'm trying to appeal to your standard now. In this case,
okay. So this is different then.
Yeah,
we exited the internal critique, and this is now an internal critique of my worldview.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start then. Start from the beginning then.
So then, do you believe then that God being noble is an absolute truth claim?
Yes.
And so, how so?
Because he is the necessary precondition for knowledge, which goes back to the tag argument, right? And if it was not the case that God is the necessary precondition for knowledge, we wouldn't be able to justify our epistemology. We wouldn't have knowledge at the second order.
So you're saying that there can't be other like secular frameworks for this to be the case?
Exactly.
I haven't heard a secular argument that gets around Hume's challenge. Now you could probably do.
I could posit like other frameworks.
Do like
that would be able to challenge this. And in that case, I think that would make your premise false in this case. That he is the only that God or theism in this case the only necessary condition, because that's what it's really about for the gospel here. Like
you're rapid fire.
You could grant like transcendent. I forget what it's called philosophically. There's like a transcendental absolutism that kind of tries to get around this problem, but it would still fall to the induction issue.
Yeah.
It's still assuming that you have reason, and like when we're asking this through tag, we're just asking where you get the vehicle to use logic, and unfortunately, I've just always heard here it is, and that doesn't ask where it came from.
Well, that's why I ask, isn't it okay to just say, I don't know, and show some intellectual humility on these kinds of things? Because really, we can't measure or verify any of this stuff past a certain point, right? We can at least agree on that. We cannot use tools. We cannot use our five senses to measure anything past a certain point, especially a deity that is not even on our plane of existence.
Well, if God exists, we would be able to, right?
If God exists, we would be able to detect it?
Well, no, I'm saying if God exists, we would be able to trust our senses. That would make sense. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm just saying it would make sense.
Well, yeah. Well, we're talking about what is true because we're talking about what is knowable, right?
Yeah, and that's what we've been talking about. But I'm saying, like, you haven't provided a scenario in which it makes sense. You're just saying it is.
In which what makes sense?
That our senses are generally reliable.
Well, I would say our senses are just generally reliable because after a certain point, it just kind of becomes self-evident. This is how we function in our day-to-day life. If they weren't reliable, we'd all probably be dead, you know? When it comes to God, though, I'm telling you already, like I did in my opening statement, that I base most of my knowledge and most of my views on empirical data, ways to verify and measure stuff, and material reality. When it comes to certain things like a cosmic designer or whatever you want to call it, like God in this instance, but some people call it differently, I just haven't seen conclusive proof from an empirical standpoint for or against this deity that could exist or might not exist. It's like a thing where we can't really find out the answers for sure. We cannot verify it until we die, kind of thing. It's kind of what I'm trying to argue with this prompt. Would you generally agree that's agreeable, or?
I would say that if you force empiricism, there may not be a way. I'm sure there are other people who could argue an empirical evidence for God. But you yourself don't believe that everything must be proved empirically.
Well, I'm when you say must, do you mean like there's a moral imperative, or like it has to be answered? Like, what do you mean by must?
Is there anything that you believe that isn't empirically proven?
Anything that I personally believe?
Santa Claus.
I would.
No, that's
empirically
empirically proven.
Because that is a good question. I would say
he ate the cookies.
I actually can't think of anything off the top of my head, at least, honestly. I don't say that as like some sort of what do you call it? Like,
but so would that
my
mean
own
you're
horn
like
kind of
a
thing,
hard
or whatever.
materialist? Because
what was that?
There's you don't come off to me as a hard materialist, but if you don't believe in anything that's not empirically proven, it almost seems like that makes you a hard materialist.
I'm not really. I haven't really read like Marx or anything like that. I think he's the guy who's behind materialism or Hegel or some shit like that. I don't really know off the top of my head. I would say I generally lean materialist based on my understanding of it. I'm not very idealist or anything like that for the most part. Maybe a little bit idealist in the sense of what I kind of want for the world and what is ideal, but that's a whole other discussion for a whole other day. But generally, when it comes to me formulating my views and how I argue stuff, I try my best to argue it based on what I can observe and measure in material reality.
Right.
There could be exceptions. I just can't think of it off the top of my head.
Here's something. Do you believe that human rights exist?
No.
Oh, hey, good. Okay. Interesting. Now, all right. Do you believe the laws of logic exist?
Depends on what you mean by exist. If you mean exist as a construct in our mind to be able to explain phenomenon that we can see, such as the law of non-contradiction and stuff like that, then yes.
Would that be?
But I sort of see the laws of logic more as kind of descriptors for how things function, rather than something that exists in the sense of like a material thing. It's just a observation statement, I would say it is.
Perfect. So you believe it doesn't exist in a material. If it doesn't exist in a material way, then that would mean you believe in something that doesn't exist in a material way.
Right.
So that would make you not a materialist.
Well, like I said, I kind of lean materialism. I haven't really read up entirely on it to be able to take a super hard stance and defend it in a case like this. So,
gotcha. And my whole point with this, and then Jeff, you had something to say. My whole point was that you believe in things that are not empirically proven, so it would be wrong to force that standard on something like God.
Well, I'm not trying to necessarily force it. I'm just trying to ask questions to be able to get to the root of your foundation and either see if you can provide some sort of material justification, or if you can just say, I don't know, or at the very least, you can't measure or verify God's existence with our current faculties that we have on hand. If I can get something like that at the very least, then I'd be more than happy. I'm not trying to force anybody to be agnostic or anything like that, to be entirely clear. I just want to ask questions and be able to learn a little bit more about you guys and stuff.
I gotcha. I have more to say to that, but Jeff did have something to say.
Oh, I was just doubling down on you because it seems like if we're going into abstract thought, those don't exist empirically. So you're not taking a hard stance on naturalism if you're granting abstract conceptual thought. Those aren't things that we can really demonstrate. I mean, we can write them out, right, and that kind of thing, but you can't like show the thoughts that are going on in your mind.
I don't really take a hard stance on most of philosophy just because it's very in our heads. It's very subjective, what different philosophical frameworks and stuff like that. I'm more so influenced by Max Stirner's egoism, who's known as like the anti-philosopher guy, right? So I generally do try to push all of like the big verbal jargon aside and try to speak more in layman's terms, not only for myself, but for the audience to understand it, which is kind of why I wanted to set the frame a little bit on how we define knowledge, whether if it's like general colloquially, something that we know based on our faculties and stuff like that, or if we're talking a very philosophical version that might end up putting us on two different pages, because I generally try to come at philosophical topics from a more colloquial standpoint.
Understandable. That's fair.
Would we want to move into closing statements and then open the panel and see what else we get?
Yeah, sure.
I think we're at the end of the discussion for the most part.
This has been a very mild-mannered discussion, so thank you. And I actually had some moving parts for my my daughter's like some things that had to do in the moment, and I'm like, thank goodness I could actually walk away and feel good about it. So thank you.
My cat barged into my room at one point, so I was trying to figure out what he wanted.
We were getting along. We were getting along.
Only
long
my
enough.
children.
That's pretty good. I'm glad that this didn't turn into like a bloodbath. Sometimes it's just.
I mean, I was prepared to go into the blood sports a little bit, but
well,
yeah, we were talking about it a little bit, but I'm glad it happened this way. Personally,
we've
typically
been
we can speak now, and then the panel can also change that up if they so choose. So you never know what you're gonna get. So let's go ahead with our closing statements, gentlemen, and then we'll move into open panel dumpster fire after we read some of these super chats. Jeff, to you.
Yeah, so when a skeptic argues that Tagg's claim God is the precondition for induction and abstract thought assumes a criterion human reasoning's reliability to argue for God, which is circular or ungrounded, especially because of Hume's problem of induction, which undermines induction's justification. Tagg does not start by assuming the reliability of human reasoning or induction in a vacuum. Rather, it argues that the intelligibility of reasoning, induction, and abstract thought presupposes a metaphysical function, a rational, sovereign God. This transcendental method sidesteps the problem of the criterion by identifying the necessary conditions for knowledge itself, rather than relying on ungrounded criterion. And with that, I'll just give it over to my partner.
Thank you. Awesome. Alex, to you.
I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Bones and Paul, for doing this. And thanks for Jeff for getting this started. Of course, thank you, Sarah. Congrats on 10K. Over here. You are. Congrats on 10K. I think when I met you like 3-4 months ago, you were at less than half that. Sarah there's a reason for that. It's because Sarah works hard. I mean, she answers DMs like instantly. Generally, she doesn't care like if you're super popular or like she's just willing to put in the work, network, and make stuff happen. I appreciate that a lot. As far as the debate goes, I do think that I provided a solid argument for the existence of God. For the prompt, is the existence of God knowable? I do think that I provided a solid answer for that. I think the argument against it was basically epistemic nihilism, although they don't seem to hold to epistemic nihilism. So while I think that, that may be a defeater, it's really hard for anyone to actually hold to that. And if they do, it's even harder to live that out. I think also, though, a big point for us was that I was able to prove from their standards, both Bones and Paul, I asked them to give me something that they would say is knowable by their standard. And I think that based on their standard, I was also able to give proof that God's existence is knowable. So go back, watch the debate. That was more towards the end, if you want to go back to it. Other than that, I'm looking forward to getting to the open panel.
Thank you, Alex. Bones, to you.
So to conclude this debate and to continue the host glazing here, the only absolute truth that we have here is that Sarah's a great moderator. So I think that's the only truth claim that we can really ground things. but yeah, outside of that, I'm going to disagree with Alex here and say that his answer to whether God is knowable is ultimately like unsatisfactory. Whether it is like complete and total epistemic nihilism, I would also disagree because I don't believe in epistemic nihilism, and I do believe that at some point there's something that I would accept to be true as a foundation that doesn't necessarily rely on a God. And at this point, I still remain pretty agnostic on the existence of a God, whether it be the Christian God, whether it be a Brahmin, whether it be the flying spaghetti monster, and whether it be this screwdriver as well. But either way, thank you very much for having this discussion. I hope to have more productive ones in the future.
Absolutely. And Paul, final words to you.
I guess I don't really have not much else to say for a very first debate panel that I've ever been on. I think it went pretty well. I'm really glad I got to talk to you guys. Thanks, Sarah, for hosting us. Ask some pretty good questions about my own views personally that I can probably look back on a little bit. But other than that, I just don't really have much else to say. I really appreciate it, guys, taking the time out to talk to me in Bones here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Same here.
Perfect. Well, thank you to all of you. And I already knew this was going to be a well-mannered debate because all four of you were able to be in a group message together to figure out dates and times, and nobody was mad, and we were all laughing and able to, get along that way. And usually I don't operate that way, but in this instance, I think it just kind of worked out. So shout out to all of you for being agreeable people and able to get along and move forward for purposes of the conversation. I have dropped the link for open panel dumpster fire. If anybody wants to go ahead and start jumping backstage, please feel free to do so. And I'm going to say this right now. Duck has appeared backstage already, and I'm going to go ahead and grant him a 10-minute veto where nobody can boot Duck for the first 10 minutes that he's on screen. And I'm only doing that just because poor Duck never even makes it on screen before he gets booted. So I'm granting him that for now. After that 10 minutes, fire away if you so will. But we want to give him some space. He's always here. He's very supportive of the show. I don't know if you guys see it in the chat, but he's always telling people to like, subscribe, share, do all of these things. He's very animated in the Discord as well. Without people like Duck, this show wouldn't be where it's at. So, I mean, he's a driver of the show in so many ways, whether you consider it to be good or bad. So we'll give him a 10-minute freebie, folks, and then I'll let you do what you want after that. All right, to the super chats, we'll get through while people start shuffling backstage. Evan Lord with the big 5 says, thank you, Jacob, for making the white race, and thank you, white men, for inventing and installing my air conditioning. The temperature reached 100 today. Yes, it was a hot one out there. I don't know if I stayed indoors. I was actually in full recovery mode today because I finally actually got to go out one night out of the, year and enjoy myself. But I paid for it full-fledged today, laying around on the couch. But I earned it, very much so. It was a long weekend with everything and all of the debates. So I earned it. But 100 today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Nuke, I won't say the last part, only for purposes of, with the big 15 says bottom shelf wine, sorry. And I will gladly accept your bottom shelf wine happily because bottom shelf wine is better than no wine at all. Random guy with the big 5 says a machine is material. How would the machine create the universe which brings material into existence while itself being material? Gentlemen, the question is to you.
Since it's towards me, I could define the universe as everything that the machine creates. That would just be the way I escape it.
I guess you could say the best thing is a simulation, maybe like a computer or something, kind of like the Matrix.
Yeah, it's just something that's either simulated or created by the machine.
We're in the simulation.
Fair enough.
It's the man.
Okay, I'll be right back. I have to use the restroom real bad.
Yeah, go for it. Most of these super chats for the next little bit were kind of goofy anyways. The chat was arguing with itself, and we all love that. Shout out to Ben for his new tomato membership. They are available to your liking. I also am starting to move the Patreon as well. I finally figured out how I wanted to do it and operate it. You're welcome to get a membership over there. As of now, there's not going to be any behind the scenes material, but you can obtain a membership over there just to show support and keep the show moving. Every little bit helps and counts and works towards something. And I will say we are working on, but we are working on some new things for the tomato community, and I'm really excited for the next steps, the next levels, and where we're going to go from here. I knew once I hit 10K, I'd have to start moving in a bigger direction. So we're going there. So stick around, but feel free to support in all sorts of different ways. It will help every little bit. Evan Lord with the big 5 says, in debates like these, I realized the true justification for knowledge and belief: force. You can brute force a bad philosophy into being successful. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
I wonder if he'll come up on the open panel. I usually see him. I would like a deeper explanation of that.
He's back there.
Cool.
He is back there.
I would just say true. That's why, to bring it back to World of Warcraft, go Alliance. Fuck yeah. we will reign supreme one day.
Wait, classic or retail?
I currently play a classic Kata, waiting for Mists of Pandaria though.
Cool. So you're a grinder. That's rough.
Yeah. Oh my god. I first actually got into World of Warcraft in Cataclysm back when it was like 2010, or it was during Dragon Soul. Actually, my dad had me go on to his Resto Druid on a second account, and I was there being the little heel slut or whatever the fuck.
Nice.
For his little raid. And I specifically remember Madness of Deathwing, that where he hit all his fucking toes. I remember dying to that a lot. I remember falling off a spine a lot too. Good memories.
Especially with your dad. Playing video games with your dad is awesome.
Yeah, and now I've picked it up again after like many years, and now I'm just I'm a DK main. So
I made the mistake of not teaching my dad the controls, so I could always whip him, and he didn't ever want to play with me again.
That's jeez. That's
I know, so bad playing video games.
Fair enough. And shots fired in the chat. Sarcastic Saint with the big 5 says, I think I will do a 5-minute timeout for Nuke since there's no proof of Nuke's donation for bottom shelf wine. Nuke, you can take 5 minutes in silence. Bye. But they did send the super chat. Bottom shelf wine. I'm not sure why.
It's like, I'm not sure what you mean by bottom shelf wine here. Like, I see the words right there. I see the language being stringed together in such a way where it is bottom shelf wine. So really, it is just true that the person who donated that did bring in bottom shelf wine. So I think that critique is invalid. We'll go there.
And Nuke, of course, says fair enough. They had a little fun in there. And then, of course, Sarcastic Saint throwing shots at Duck. Poor Duck. He just takes a beating. Here's another 5 to time out Duck, since he is a pain in the ass and never learns. Duck, you are one of the people that give me a headache. So yeah.
I've never met this Duck, so this will be interesting.
Yeah, Duck's cool. He's what's an acquired taste. I'll say that. And Nuke fires back to Sarcastic Saint, saying, Sarah, explain to Saint I paid you for your wine and he must donate $100. I mean, I agree. I think Saint should donate $100 just for timing Nuke out for a super chat he claims wasn't there that was. And Sarcastic Saint fires back, and Nuke, take a break in the back for another 5 minutes and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Nuke, you are talking. Yes. Here's a shovel for you. Oh, poor Saint and poor Nuke, man. Poor Nuke. But I think Nuke is flying fine in the chat, so it'll be all right. A random guy.
This is our chat's Israel versus Iran.
I love it. I love it. Random guy sends 20 and says, for the left, by what mechanism do you determine which axioms are valid? This mechanism would have to be prior to the axiom, which would make the axiom non-axiomatic. The other side presups God, which avoids the trilemma of axioms.
I mean, I would just say that like how they describe it, God would just end up being like an axiom in this case. And under their view, I would say that it's not really justified in any sort of way, that it's more so to satisfy the definition of an axiom there. It would just be accepted, that they accept it to be true, or they just establish it. For like what mechanism do I determine by which axioms are valid? Personally, I just go off of the summation of my sense data, and I just take that and I then establish and or accept that something is going to be true and that I should just basically operate as if it were true in all cases. Knowing that I might be fallible in my senses or in my reasoning at some degree, but that it is practically useful for me.
Yeah, I would say generally the same thing. Just kind of like my sense that what I read, what I see, what I experience is kind of how I form my axioms and my foundation and the such.
And who knows, we might have to go into like philosophy a little bit more. Like, I'm not formally educated in philosophy. Like, the most education I've gotten was reading a little bit of Stanford Encyclopedia in my spare time. My first introduction into logic was some like random little like summer camp type thing before I went into middle school. And there was a class on basic logic. And I've kind of just touched up on it since then.
This is what we talked about, right? Once you start using reasons or mechanisms to determine which axioms are valid, you start making those your axioms. And then once those are your axioms, you just do it all over again.
Yeah, it just becomes recursive.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And last one, this was a mercy. Evan Lord sending out a mercy. Duck, I may disagree with you and give you some shit, but I wouldn't block you because you definitely add something in chat and open panel 5 for Duck, and that's to revive. So that canceled out Sarcastic Saints chat earlier. But yes, like I said, Duck is a very big supporter of the show and the channel, and I wish he got a little bit more love when he was here. But unfortunately, the chat, the audience, the other panelists just don't seem to like him very much. But I appreciate.
He could be a great person.
I appreciate the support he gives, and he stirs up the chat. I mean, that's kind of it's beneficial to the entirety of the show if you think about it. So, yeah,
Duck is official tomato lore for sure.
Yeah. We love you, Duck. All right, gentlemen. Well, that's it for the super chats. And let me make something very clear to the chat. I am sleepy tonight. So if you don't up the game this evening, I am happy to make this a short-lived open panel and we can all go to bed early because I have much sleep to catch on. Outside of that, let's get the panel
what Sarah's saying is that we bored her to death.
No. I can be bored all evening and not give a shit. But the super chats, though, I mean, certainly I'm happy to give my time and do these things, but I don't have to give more than what I already gave. All right, let's kick off open panel. All right, gentlemen. Let me start with Duck. Duck, it is at the 2 hour and 13-minute marker. I'll give you to the 2:23 before any boots are valid and usable. They can send them now if they want, but I will not apply anything until the 2:23 marker. That gives you the first 10 minutes for free. And just a thought process for everyone. I set a goal 30 minutes ago that said keep going or go to bed. You now have 28 minutes left to fulfill that goal before I just hit the shutdown button. So move quick or forever hold your peace. Go ahead.
I'll go fast. Sorry, I'm clearing my old person throat. So I have just a question, I guess, for all the panelists. As an atheist, yeah, I do have here my copies of Chronicles of Narnia. I know C.S. Lewis is a big guy for a lot of American Christians, British Christians. And so it's difficult for me when I think that, well, if I'm talking about, how can we know God exists, or what would that be like? If I'm taking a character out of C.S. Lewis or Chronicles of Narnia, it seems to me that that's a lot like taking a story out of the Bible, which was written by dozens, hundreds of different authors over hundreds of years, and saying that, well, look, we can then have knowledge about the guy that they're describing. That sounds odd because we know that Aslan doesn't exist. And this brings up why, as an atheist listening to you guys, it's hard for me to accept even that this debate wasn't apologetics at its core versus philosophy, right? Does that make sense? That, how can I have faith if this is the sort of what we're basing our epistemologies on? Can't we be accused of or be confused about doing biblical theological philosophy versus just doing philosophy and being earnest?
I don't think there's a distinction between the two necessarily. I think that if you're going to get into theology, you're probably also going to get into philosophy as well.
Did you mean like apologetics, like because we weren't proselytizing, or do I misunderstand that?
No, I meant that if I have a question about the methodology, and it seems like there is on stage there's an incentive to win or be right. It doesn't seem like I'm actually talking about knowing something. It seems like I'm talking about what someone else wants me to know.
Well, I think you're right in that whenever we do things publicly, there is always pride involved to an extent. I think all of us here today did a great job at trying not doing that. But I mean, everybody wants to show off a little bit. It's human nature. Everybody wants to win. That's human nature. But I do think that we all care deeply about these issues, and that we do want to understand what true knowledge is. So.
Okay, so the answer is that no, we really wanted to though, and so you think that people in the audience and chat, even of the atheist persuasion, we're doing our bench presses with our books and stuff like that. Big nerds. I just accept that. Well, yeah, if people are being good faith, they don't get confused about apologetics or about theology and about philosophy, about how I would know something. Like Sarah saw me backstage eating a plate full of tater tots, kind of bad panelist behavior, but she and I would both know that I made tater tots, and it seems like we're having a very different conversation.
Yeah, so we talked about first order and second order claims in the debate. Do you know the difference?
First order and second order claims.
It's okay. I just don't want to speak about it if you're not familiar.
Is it like modal logic or something close to that? Something different?
I probably couldn't give a great definition, but examples. A first order knowledge claim is that you made tater tots. The second order knowledge claim is that you know that you made tater tots. Okay. So I wouldn't deny that you have first order.
Bring it back. It's the first order is the what, the second order is the how.
Yeah, so I would understand that as a philosopher, and maybe this is a gap in my knowledge, so I will look it up. But I would understand this as a linguistic statement. So saying that, like, well, in either case, if I'm saying I made tater tots or I know I made tater tots, I'm in the first statement. A linguistic claim isn't necessarily like deeply semantic, except for saying that something exists. Like I'm assuming something exists. Right, I can point to a tater tot in the world. I'm signifying the tater tot, and if I say I know that exists, then that means that like I believe I have a justified belief. So,
yeah, I mean the issue is I'm not going to discredit your first order claim. So when you say it seems like we're talking about two different things, I grant that even as an atheist, you know that you made tater tots.
Okay, but yeah, but you're trusting me based on a testimony. You weren't actually there when I made tater tots. You're not Sarah. You could say Sarah's reliable if she confirms that I made tater tots. That's a good thing, but
right. So I may not know it, but if you have justified true belief, then you would know it. But it is because, all right, this is what I got from what you said. You said everybody lives here and we do things daily, but this debate is up here and you're not reaching the people down here. Is that right?
No, that's it's a little different saying, yeah, because it's still that distinction between what apologetics might be like versus what philosophy might be like. Like that's sort of the problematic part.
I think if you're gonna
go ahead, Jeff.
I think if you're gonna get into apologetics, you're gonna kind of, again, I don't see them as, there's a distinction, but I don't think that they're necessarily distinct, right? So like, even when we ask, how do we know the Bible is real? That's a philosophical question, right?
Who's typing? Don't type unless you mute.
So I think maybe that's just not true, right? You don't go to a state school, whether it's Arizona State or San Jose or something, and in philosophy you might have a philosophy of religions class, but when you get to 300 and 400 level philosophy classes, or if you go to graduate school, there's a reason why there's kind of Alvin Plantinga and William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig, who specifically does apologetics, Alvin Plantinga, who I think is a little more dedicated into the philosophy, but there's a reason that philosophy and apologetics and theology is different.
You got 3 more minutes before I apply your boots. So you got 3 more minutes before your safety is gone.
So I see how I would say that they go kind of hand in hand, because if you're going to go into apologetics, you have to understand like what makes the Bible true, which interpretation is correct. There's a bunch of philosophical questions there that we can dive into. So I'm just not convinced that I would grant that they're a little bit different in what they're looking at, but they're not distinct in that way. They kind of flow together, right?
No, because atheists think apologetics, like there's obviously nice people that apostatize for their church or whatever it is, but a lot of them come off as predators who try to brainwash people, and they think that if someone doesn't know something or they don't have something and they can replace that for them, it's not that different from like a CIA agent working an asset. But the nature of religion is they're just trying to get people to come to their church for whatever reason.
I think it's kind of disingenuous
with your false premise that you smuggled in there. You said that you think that they're indoctrinating people, right?
That's not a false premise. I think that, right? I think when I see apologetics, I've seen T-Jump with like Cliff and his brother and stuff. Cliff seems like he'd be a really nice guy. Like he's someone that you could go wine tasting with or go hiking with or something. But when you're talking to people about something that they don't know and a topic, and your goal isn't to teach them, your goal is to convert them to a religion, that's a really weird fucking thing that humans shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
Strange.
I can't convert you to Christianity.
I know you can't, but I'm not everyone, right? I'm not everyone.
You can convert anybody. That's not for me to do.
Do you think that all salesmen are disingenuous?
Do I think salesmen are? I mean, I used to do sales, so.
Were there times where you were disingenuous to make a sale? I mean, I think every salesman has that.
Sales is about information parity, right? If you're good at sales, you're flattening the information curve between you and your customer. You're learning from each other. That's how modern sales works, because that's like, you could say like, oh, philosophically, that's how humans work. Humans want to socialize and learn and spend time with people that want to learn with them.
It's not just information, because if it was just information, you wouldn't need salespeople. You would just have sales letters on websites, and that would sell people.
But you can't say that, because you can see it as just information. Like that's what the Bible is words on a page. It's just information, and it depends who reads it based on how they interpret it. And like if you give a Bible to a person in India, a Hindu in India, they're not going to interpret this as, oh, there must be a God somewhere. That's what information means, and it's just ink on a page, right? Does that not make sense?
How do you know your interpretation is correct, though?
Because how? So you're asking about my epistemology. I mean, I gotta bounce out soon, but you know,
I just know, like, if, like, let's just say you're the Buddhist and I hand you the Bible.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
How do you know your interpretation is correct?
I would ask you that.
60
I would ask you
seconds.
that 'cause, you know, since you guys were the ones debating, my original question was, if you recall, if I have C.S. Lewis here, and if I were to pick up C.S. Lewis with a fishing hook, like a fishing lure or something, and I see this person, I see the C.S. Lewis guy, he's on the street, he wrote this book, maybe he one day wakes up and says this was divinely inspired. He was an author who was short in stature. Divinely inspired book. He was he did slut shaming. He went through his reps that you have to do to be a Christian, to be a great Christian apologist. And so that's not begging the question to say that you're pulling from a book that I can physically rent from the library. Why can't I just go do the same thing?
You can get it in the library, but how
I'm going to put Duck in the back. You got 10 minutes backstage. So hold that thought, Duck, okay? But you gentlemen can still answer to it as needed.
Yes, so I would still just ask, yeah, you can get it in the library. That's not asking my question. How do you know when you're reading it that you have the correct interpretation?
I know, like for manuals for like building like a IKEA, whatever. Like a lot of the times, like someone could go and try to build that, and they get frustrated because they can't quite figure out the instructions right. So sometimes it's good to like see a video from the IKEA people explaining it, and then you're able to go and understand it better. And I think that with religion or philosophy or any other sort of ideology or complex thought, that could go and be more applicable as opposed to just indoctrination. And I gotta say, like, his thing of like it being predatory, it's no more predatory than just like someone going to like a club or a lodge or some like place where people go for duties and for dues and membership to go and be a part of a community. And a community is valuable, and every community has shared rules and everything.
Right.
Even atheist organizations.
He would have to. He would have to demonstrate the predatory part, because I'm not granting that until it's demonstrated.
Sarah, if you could get some sluts up here for me to shame, I do want to be a great Christian apologist.
I was about to say, I think the Whatever podcast is a good place for you then.
Hit me up,
Brian. No. Fresh and Fit is much better in that respect.
There you go. That's
Ryan. And just fair warning to all of you watching, you have 15 minutes to hit that goal, or I'm going to bed. I have no issue shutting this shit down faster than you can blink your eyes. So figure it out.
Before we do that, Evan, you had a great super chat if you want to expound on it.
I will say, like, there's a lot of times, like, throughout history, like, even, like, small regional places, like, there was a city in, like, the Sahara trade route where one ruler there was cruel and basically implanted his own sort of ideology and basically was the main adopter for Sufi Islam and was able to go and spread from there. And the people there were all, they followed a different branch of Islam. I think, I forget the exact name because I don't speak it well, but like just by doing that, you can enforce like against the will of most of other people, as long as you have like the weapons, and you just need to do that for like a generation or two. And then people will always, like people that are born into it know nothing else. So then the idea or the religion and stuff can just propagate. And I guess like you don't need to go and debate ideas or if there's an idea that is pretty close to being entirely defensible and solid, then you don't need to focus on like making it perfect. You can just focus on making it well enough to function and have society like have things work with it. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry if that came across as a bit weird. I'm a bit tired, so sorry.
No, it makes sense now.
So this was my question in regards to the atheist comment there. Where do we see anybody forcing the religion of Christianity? Because I understand like the Crusades happened, but at the same time, modern day Christians do not force their religion upon anybody. We welcome the communities into open arms and allow them to find their own faith within Jesus Christ. So there's no force doctrine that I can see within the modern day Christianity that forces you to become a Christian. You have to allow yourself to be open to God.
You're going to hell. What kind of mic are you using? It's like got some kind of screech on it.
Yeah, it does.
I apologize. I'm using my headphones. Let me change out my headphones real quick. It could be dying.
And Evan Lord's not
a counter
an
rhetoric.
atheist.
So I hear it all the time. But if the atheists want to answer it, or agnostics want to answer it, that's fine.
What was the question again?
So he's basically saying, what about the religion makes it forced upon you?
I guess to answer that, I want to say most of the force is just going to be coming from, I guess, historically to answer that, the Crusades, all the holy wars, yada yada yada. Nowadays, I would say most of the force is probably more so from parent to child, in the case that they would be like taking the child to go anywhere. But at that point, you could also say that you're forcing the child to go to the mall or the store or something like that, which it would get into like really murky ground. That's more me trying to like steel man it.
The force could come from Christians in government that are.
Yeah,
the force could come from Christians in government who are writing laws.
Yeah.
I don't know whose thing is doing that.
Oh, actually, you bring that up.
Maybe it wasn't Alwines. I thought it was Alwines, but he was muted.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's mine because like I'm still hearing it even while I'm muted and stuff.
I think it's.
I don't know.
Chrissy, you're not using headphones, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I would just
That's
mute
why,
up while you're not talking.
Yeah, now it's gone, right?
Per Radical Voter's comment, actually, if anyone saw the interview between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz made this really funny statement about his defense of Israel being because of the Bible. Like that I thought was like a pretty big red flag right there. Like for one,
that's a very common thing about Israel, right? There's a very common belief, especially through the Bible Belt, that like what's going on over there is biblical prophecy, and that it needs to happen a certain way to bring about revelations or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it could get us all killed.
A lot of Christians disagree with that, though. Yeah, a lot of Christians do disagree with that being a revelation standpoint, where you're looking at the Bible and the Revelation chapters. It's a more of a propagandist take if you really look at it from that aspect.
I agree.
Yeah, it is a propaganda point, but it's from a Christian worldview. Whether it be like, I want to say like Southern Baptists are probably the most likely to hold that view, but
well,
their viewpoints could also hold that too.
To debate too, dude. They're fun to debate.
I'll team up with anybody on the panel against this dispensationalism. So,
yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Southern Baptist, but like that's what I mean though. When you're arguing from a moral standpoint, or if you're arguing from a theological standpoint, like you guys said earlier in the debate or discussion, or however you want to classify it as, when you guys said there's a machine or a simulation, what created that machine or the simulation to take effect? There's nothing that creates that to thus create the simulation or thus create the machine.
My answer and Paul's likely answer here would be I don't know, because we're agnostic.
But if you don't have something that's created from something, then how was it created?
It could be the case that it wasn't created and that it was just always there.
But how was it always there though? Is the question. You're still
at some point, like I could give you like an infinite number of justifications, and at some point I would just have to say I don't know. I just accept something to be true. That's what.
But if you're,
I brought this up earlier, but like Munchausen's trilemma, like I would basically just say I would have to dogmatically, like I would have to terminate it somewhere and say this fact that I think is true. I just agree that it's true dogmatic.
But we wouldn't have the issue with the Munchausen trilemma, because we're appealing to like a mind that is the source of truth itself, who speaks to us and reveals itself in like history and creation. So it kind of avoids.
It would be up to you to prove that that specific one is the one that revealed it to you. And as far as I know, that's a few steps further than what this debate was about. It was more so proving that a generic God is knowable.
Well, the proof would be if you deny that revelation, then you fall victim to the Munchausen trilemma, right? So
I think that your worldview also falls under that too. You would.
Well, no, because like you're trying to build truth on shifting rules, right? But our rules are revealed in an unchanging, like necessary.
How do you know? How do you know that those rules were revealed to you?
Because the denial of the revelation would lead to like a contradiction.
So that's going to be self-defeating.
Okay, buddy.
Like you're saying that your knowledge can't be possible without revelation, and you're just assuming that what is revealed to you is true.
There's also image bearer status.
I mean,
image bearer status also demonstrates that.
I mean, I could break it down really simple. Like if we're gonna say real simple, like if we're gonna say something's true, we have to use standards. So those standards are gonna be like arbitrarily invented by a human mind, which means anything you prove from those standards is also arbitrary. So we need an objective reference point in like a revealed mind of God. And without that, there's no objective truth, proof, there's no objective knowledge. It's that simple.
And Elite Eater, God, I love that name. I'm a big foodie fan, so if you're eating all the time and you are among the elite, shout out to you, my friend, says, we can't yet confirm or deny the existence of a God, plural gods, in my opinion, and we probably never will. Violence over religion is stupid. Religion used to trick people. And just a fair warning to you guys, you have 3 more super chats to go and only 6 minutes left. You can do it. I believe in you. So if anybody wants to respond, go ahead.
So PMars, I got one quick thing to say, and yeah, you guys made me change my avatar to the duck spaghetti monster, by the way. So I'm gonna blame you guys for that. But yeah, PMars, when you're talking about the Munchausen trilemma, like there's a couple ways to approach it, but I think you're misusing it, right? You know, first of all, you're not treating it like a thought experiment. You're treating it like a law of nature. It is a thought experiment. Right? It doesn't have to do specifically with the brain. It may have to do with how brains think or how logic and axioms work, or can work in the brain.
You're not understanding. It has to do with like ultimate reason, right? Is human reason ultimate, or is the mind of God and God's reason ultimate? Well, you're just not addressing what you're not addressing what I'm saying.
Well, the problem is under our current understanding, we really can't know, and that's what kind of Munchausen's trilemma is kind of positing here. It's that under our current like framework for understanding logic and truth and all that, there are certain points to where things terminate, and at some point, like we have to kind of fall into one of 3 categories. Either we maintain a circular argument, a regressive argument that recurses infinitely, or we have a dogmatic argument where we just put down, we draw a line in the sand and say, I'm just going to accept this and go no further.
Did you learn essence energy distinction?
No, I have not.
But that's only a problem if you.
I would look into that, because like if you're saying like 100% knowable, I would probably like absolute, like God's absolute. If the prompt said God is absolutely knowable, I'd say probably not. We can't know. God's mysterious in certain ways, but can we know him? Absolutely.
Well, I mean, we don't have the. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Green sends in a big 20 and says, I care about both things. Crying, keeping the panel on and keeping you off. So that's another 20 minutes added on to you, Ryan. You currently, with everything added up and what's ticking down, you're sitting at 9 minutes, and I'm going to add the 20 on. So that brings you up to 29. And then Duck, you're heading to the back. You got 5 minutes back there.
He was my only chance at slut shaming. I'm not going to be a great Christian apologist.
I mean, people can always bring Ryan back up. So yeah, he can be $30. We'll bring him up right now.
To bring him up.
Yeah.
Someone do it. Someone be the oiler here.
And you guys just need one more super chat. You've got 3 minutes to do it. One more super chat. I don't care what it says within TOS guidelines, but yeah. One more and the show keeps going. You got 3 minutes, chat.
I wish they would have kept Duck up here. I wanted to ask my atheist question.
He'll be back in 5 minutes.
Oh, sweet. So, but yeah, but if you're saying though that you're into that dilemma to where you're allowing it to be agreed upon based off a dogmatic situation, then wouldn't you thus say that if you were pushed into a corner, you would have to say that God is real?
If at some point I would run out of arguments that I would know, I would have to accept that I could be up to the possibility that a generic God would exist. I wouldn't be necessarily nailed down to any specific God, and that would require much more both inner thought and more so exploring other religions, both existing or maybe even looking into creating new religions. I have no fucking clue, but I would maybe have to accept it at some point based off of that. I'm not saying that I will never believe in any God, because that would put me in the atheist category, which I'm not.
You said you grew up Catholic?
Yeah, funnily enough, I would technically still be Catholic per the taking all the sacraments. I am confirmed, but I haven't been excommunicated. So in a loose sense, Catholic.
You're just a bad Catholic.
I'm a bad Catholic who doesn't believe in Catholicism.
Well, you shouldn't, but I don't want to stir that pot yet.
I will say this: out of the three major, I guess not denominations, but sects or whatever the fuck of Christianity, Protestants have the least amount of what I'd say aura. But Orthodox and Catholics, we've got it fucking nailed down, okay? We've got it fucking nailed down.
I think when you bring up the deist God, that makes me think of the prompt of the show is God's existence knowable? And if we ask the question, if God designs the universe in a way that the universe could never know God, to me it seems like we could never know God. And so therefore the only way we can know God is if he takes the initiative to reveal himself to us. Mm-hmm. And that's the type of God we have in Christianity. And so I think the deist God is kind of you could never even know it, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess that's a problem with impersonal impersonal gods. At that point, you can't really know them per se. You can kind of just say that they exist. I want to say, I think Brahmin, I brought him up earlier. I think that's one of the gods that are not personal.
But don't you think wouldn't it make sense to you that if the source of existence and truth was a person that speaks to us, that's pretty much the only way we could know that type of thing? Because I don't think science or logic is ever going to be able to answer questions about the source of all existence and truth.
I would have to ask questions about your God specifically, but is he all knowing or yeah?
Well, I would say I'm a Christian. I would say it's a necessary mind. That's the ground of being, and then we can only know it because it speaks to us. Because I don't think we can there's no other way to know that type of thing.
So, what are the characteristics of the Christian God that you believe in?
Well, I mean, Trinity, omnipotent, omniscient. It'd be standard of good, standard of truth.
Okay. Do you think that there is some scenario that God can conjure up where he would be able to reveal that to us?
Well, I believe we are in an environment where God's revealed and obvious, and that people just kind of suppress the truth, I guess, or
what's the evidence for that, really?
Because you drive over a bridge, math is an absolute truth. You trust math with your life, You know,
I wouldn't necessarily say that math is an absolute truth as we know it. Like we can say that it's true.
Well, you can
math,
say that.
It's
but,
derivative of some type
it's
of.
absolute enough that you trust it with your life. Because if the math is incorrect in the bridge,
it's absolute. Then
if the math is incorrect in the bridge, though, you're gonna collapse and go bye-bye, right?
It's
so you trust it.
You utilize the tools.
You trust it with your life, and so for like you are to me, you navigate your life as if there's absolute truths that requires an absolute foundation, and that's the God of the Bible.
Not necessarily.
Does everybody do that?
To go back to the tool analogy, you can misuse tools and you can use tools for the wrong purpose. I could put a ruler inside of a glass and say I can measure the amount of liquid inside of it using this ruler, and that would just end up being false right there because a ruler is used to measure length, and what I'm trying to measure is volume in this case. And I would just be misusing the tool and it wouldn't be useful there. Just like saying that assuming that math isn't true wouldn't make things work. There are ways to misuse math, and at that point with the bridge it would collapse or do some weird things otherwise.
But I mean, do you think 1 + 1 = 2? Can that change or something and like be different someday?
As we have defined math, no.
There's nothing stopping us theoretically in the future from swapping out 2 with 3 and swapping the places, though.
Okay, but if I say
the concept of Arabic numerals, they're like 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're just placeholders for describing like the number of objects, and we're just labeling that.
This is considered a mathematical and necessary truth. Typically, I don't know if you're going to deny that. That's weird because
I'm not necessarily. I'm saying that as far as we can ground it, yes, it is true. And we can only really ground it insofar as how we've grounded it linguistically.
That's what we're saying. That's the proof of God right there, because that's an unchanging truth. And so you need an unchanging foundation. The Christian God has an unchanging
there
nature.
could be other mathematical systems that exist that we are not aware of. That could be.
No, but math is an abstraction. So you need something you need something concrete and unchanging.
Isn't God an abstraction too?
Is that what we're talking about? No, God is concrete. So when we're talking about a foundation,
so is God physical then?
Yeah, God is the source of all existence. He's the most physical thing there, or not physical. He's concrete.
This is hilarious.
So wait.
This
So
is
what do you mean by
fabulous. I love
concrete,
this shit.
Isn't you love it?
I do. When you get up there and make a fool out of yourself, it's just absolutely pure entertainment.
What did he say that made him?
It's just everything PMAR says.
I'm correct. I've been reading books.
I'm reading too. Like
these damn atheists want to burn all the books. I'm telling you,
we're not atheists. We're not.
They had their way.
They're
gonna burn all the books.
Brenda, are you an atheist?
I've been reading
Yes,
Dune.
I am.
Doesn't mean a Shai Halud.
I would love.
Oh God, he's a fucking sandworm.
I would love Paul and Bones to tell you why you're wrong for being an atheist.
I take the atheist claim to be that there's a positive claim that no gods exist, and I agree right here. I am saying that I don't know whether a god exists. I'm agnostic.
Same here.
Okay.
Why is Brenda wrong? Go.
You don't have any more evidence than they do from an empirical standpoint to justify the lack of belief in God's existence.
I think I can.
How?
Yeah, go for it. Let's hear it.
The lack of evidence.
Lack of evidence isn't evidence that God doesn't exist.
Sure it is.
How?
Phenomenal conservatism.
Phenomenal what?
Phenomenal conservatism.
What's that?
That things are as they appear to us until our best theories can prove them wrong. It appears to me that there's no God.
We do mean
evidence for God. So
Brenda, you do mean
conservatism, then I can conclude that God doesn't exist until and unless you can provide evidence that he does exist.
Well, hang on, Brenda. Is God logically possible in phenomenal conservatism?
It's so funny. They use the big words.
Is God logically possible in
You literally just used the words phenomenal conservatism.
Is God logically possible in
It's
phenomenal
hilarious.
conservatism?
Dude, the Trinity is not logically possible, is it?
That's not what I asked, is it, dummy?
Yeah, well, if that's God, then that God is not possible, is it?
That's not what I asked, is it, dummy?
Yes, it is. Well, you didn't define God.
You just take that to be like.
I take it
Is
to be
God logically possible? Yes or no?
no,
Oh, it's not logically possible.
right?
Can you demonstrate
Because
that? Go ahead.
because the Trinity is not logically possible.
But he could say phenomenal conservatism. The
God,
universe is
what's
intelligently
wrong with
designed.
like the other guy?
Phenomenal
Look at the
conservatism?
flying spaghetti monster. Can you go through every single religion and refute it for me? Go ahead.
I don't have to.
Oh, I don't have to. Okay.
You're making a positive claim about the lack of existence of God, so you do have to prove it.
Do anions?
I think so. Yeah, God is real, and it's the flying.
Do anions?
Prove that wrong.
Do anions exist? Do anions exist?
What anions?
Anions, not anions. Not anions. That's different. Anions. Do they
What's
exist?
anion? What's an anion?
No, do they exist?
What's an anion?
I don't have to define it.
Yes, you do.
Why?
Wait, I can.
Oh, now I have to define what it means?
Wait, I can
Right?
define.
Yes.
What is this? Why is this unbalance where you don't have to define things, but I do? So if you say God exists, then you need to define your terms, right?
I can define the flying spaghetti monster as a flying plate of spaghetti with 2 meatballs
as eyeballs.
Sure. Yep. I think that spaghetti, meatballs, and flying plates can certainly exist.
Hey,
Okay,
Brendan, is Wolverine logically possible?
I like how we've gone from us against them, and now all of us are against this guy. Or person.
This person is trans, and I prefer.
Oh, I didn't know. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm used to it. This is a manosphere.
Wolverine
This is a manosphere
logically
place.
possible?
I'm used to the heavy dripping of testosterone in here.
Wait, are you saying
Well,
that you're part of the manosphere?
Brenda, they're giving you 5 minutes in the back because you remind them too much of Mel. I'll set a timer
Good.
now.
I need to make some rice for fried rice. So I'll
There you go.
Fair enough. We'll
Yep.
give you 5 minutes.
I love fried
And
rice.
Duck, you have less than 3 minutes. Ryan has left. His timer, he had 16 minutes left now, but he left a few minutes ago. But all right.
Yeah, phenomenal conservatism is like if it seems to you to be the case, absent any defeaters, then you can accept it as true.
Right.
Which
So if I
practically, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say practically, like we do this every day because we're not, dealing with epistemology in that sense. When we look at things and it seems to be a certain way, we accept it as true. But that doesn't seem to get you really from belief to knowledge.
Yeah, if it just seems to be the case that I believe there's a God, then I believe there's a God absent a defeater. And then if I grant Tag and Hume and all the other philosophy, they still have to go through all that shit, dude.
Yeah, and then what is a defeater? If I just reject your defeaters, am I still absent defeaters?
That's not a defeater. Yeah, you'd have to.
This could also just apply to like any made up deity too, like the flying spaghetti monster.
Right. Yeah, you'd have
we
to
need
put
to mainstream the flying spaghetti monster, man. I swear.
I was about to say we could in theory make it very lucrative too if we play it out of the Scientology playbook too.
Like a hardcore atheist, I used to use the flying spaghetti monster all the time. I'm glad that this Pastafarian religion stops.
Pastafarian. Pronounced right.
Crazy. I'm an Alfredo realist.
Fuck yeah, dude.
I'm more of a marinara guy, but okay.
What I'm about to head off, but one last argument I'd like to make about like the about people knowing about God or gods is there's many different temples or religious structures around the world, and the way that it was done, it was detrimental to the society, where it costed either so much that the society collapsed, or it's the only thing left while everything else was destroyed. Like think of like the Mayan pyramids that were slowly adapted, or the Aztec pyramid where they just happened to find in like the jungle or what have you. Like these sorts of structures, while beautiful on its own, I don't think someone could justify the entire community building it for like their own palace or something like that. And I'd say that is almost sort of proof, besides like a proof of like faith of the society, but proof that something kind of like influenced them enough to feel like where they are obligated to build it. Because there's like, I don't think there's like a logical reason why someone would go and like destroy their society to build something if they didn't feel like, if they didn't, serious consequences and real consequences would happen.
What if their God was false though?
I would say more demonic then, or like just some supernatural entity goes and makes it happen.
Because I think there's an argument to be made that the human tendency towards religion points to could point to the truth that God exists. So I think that's kind of the argument that you're making, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's 100% true because of that, but I do think that there could be an argument made for that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you could test the other morality systems and epistemic beliefs of that God or what it's granting. Like, example, Mormonism has a false prophet, right?
And they got billions, and they build a lot of things.
Yeah.
Do you think Mormonism and Christianity have different epistemic criteria? It's just funny because they both use the Bible, which most people generally accept.
Well, anyway, good night.
Well, yeah, they're
It's nice to see you, Evan.
See you, Evan.
They're going off of their interpretation of it based off of the Book of Mormon. So remember that Joseph Smith added himself to the book, which you're not supposed to do, by the way. So Christians can just objectively go, no, this isn't Christianity. You're not supposed to add or subtract from the book.
But they both have. Can you respond to that component that Christianity and Mormonism both have a Bible and an Old Testament, right? So you find all these books around. You're divinely inspired. You know, okay, I can grant you that people were saying that at that time. Some people were saying that. Romans weren't, but some people were saying that. And so it seems to me that if you want to be critical of Islam or critical of Mormonism, critical of Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever it is, you're ultimately still rolling back into the same modes of human thinking. That's what I want. I would like anyone to respond to that.
What do you mean? I mean, again, I would just point to the false prophet, as I would for Islam.
That doesn't do it. You already said that once.
It does do that. What are you talking about?
How does having a false prophet respond to the fact that both books have the fucking Bible? Am I speaking fucking Spanish?
To the Bible,
Am I
then
speaking a foreign fucking language?
If they're
Am I
pointing
speaking
to the
a
Bible,
foreign
they're in
fucking
trouble.
language?
Are you supposed to add to the Bible or not? Go look it up.
You're not responding to the fucking
I
thing I'm
did.
telling
I just
you. What
did.
is wrong with your head?
What is wrong with your head?
Nothing. I'm asking a
You look up
reasonable
a
question.
where it says, do
Here's
not
the bullet
add or
points
subtract
right
to
here.
the Bible.
Oh,
You
boy.
You're not supposed to add or subtract to it. That's not for you to do. So Mormonism's done. It's toast. If you're going to point to the Bible, you're fucking done. You're toast.
So you're saying sola scriptura.
No.
Your final answer is
No,
sola
I don't believe in sola scriptura.
Can I ask a question here?
What the fuck are you talking about then?
Can I ask a question here? What do we do with those books in the New Testament that are known forgeries?
How are they forgeries?
There are books in the New Testament that are known to be forgeries.
How are they forgeries?
Scholarship has revealed that they are forged.
Who's the scholar that says that they're forgeries?
So it's denial then.
No.
That's your response.
No, you're appealing to authority.
I'm asking you a question and you can't directly answer me.
You're like a
Well,
deer in
yeah,
the headlights,
you're
dude.
making a
Come on.
claim that something
bro.
has been that you're
Yeah,
making
yeah.
a claim that, and then he's asking you who are these scholars,
He's
and
like
I think
fucking
that.
Andrew's little cum rag or something.
Oh my God,
Answer
Duh.
anything.
Wow.
Gross.
Jeez.
I have a wife, by the way.
It doesn't mean you're not a cum rag. Do you not understand
Okay,
logic?
okay, all right.
Kind of a little bit over the top there.
Just a little bit.
So
Throw ad hominems to throw ad hominems. Are you
Sure.
upset about something?
Yeah, because you're being
Hey.
disrespectful as fuck. You're telling you instead of just
Oh,
saying
oh,
I don't
this
know. Instead of just saying I can't answer, that's not what I sound like. Instead of just saying I can't answer a question or I don't understand it, can you rephrase it? You're trying to tell me that I have to know something that I can't know. You don't see how that's bad faith and disrespectful, and why I would say you're Andrew's comrade when you're acting like an asshole wearing a Crucible hat? How is that disconnected from what's happening between us right here? How is this wrong?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I hurt your poor little feelings, Duck. I'm sorry you don't
my
know what
feelings. I don't sound
is.
like that. I don't feel like that. I don't act like that.
I don't give a shit.
So just say that then. Why are you
I think
defending yourself
bigger-
saying I'm ad
I think the
hominem you?
bigger thing
That's not what
that's
I'm
a
doing.
bit more egregious here is that he's advertising a different platform for debate. I think he's trying to siphon from the audience.
Oh.
But
No, I can't.
Anyway, speaking of Andrew, Duck, you saw the Mormonism debate, right?
I didn't know. I was doing other debates at that time.
Gotcha. I would go check it out. It was a good debate.
All right, Doc.
panel for a little
Enjoy your 5 in the back. And actually, I don't even think Krabby is a big Andrew fan. So for him to Krisky, I'm gonna just keep muting your mic, especially if you're not talking, because it is like screeching in my ear when your mic is on and you're not talking, and other people are. All right. Yeah, I'm surprised that Krabby booted you for that one. All right, 5 minutes in the back, Duck.
Is that word TOS, by the way, in Crab's name?
It's not.
Okay.
It's just
I was just
he
wondering, I didn't know.
changed his name. It used to be Rude Mud Crab, and now it's Rude Cunt Crab. But I like saying Rude Mud Crab because I find that to be like that's his name that I've always known. And Sarcastic saying, adding another 5 minutes. You sound like a whiny child and need a timeout. Wear the dunce hat. Poor Duck. I mean, you did kind of.
Is this common for this guy on here? Or?
Yes.
Yes, it's common. This is manosphere.
This
as I
is
said.
why Duck gets timed out a lot. Sometimes they even just time him out in the chat too to shut him up completely. Who left?
Jeez.
Andrew.
Somebody left.
One person talking.
So
for the other side, does the other side have any non-question begging arguments for God?
Can you explain why the argument we gave was question begging?
I'm asking for a non-question begging argument
Right.
from you.
I disagree with your assumption that my argument was question begging.
What is your first premise?
If knowledge is possible, then God's existence is knowable. Knowledge is possible, therefore God's existence is knowable.
Right. So what's the argument for that?
So that was
Premise?
modus ponens, right?
No, what's the argument for your first premise? Why should I believe it?
So the disjunctive syllogism that I gave in support of premise 1 is either God is a necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge or not. It is not the case that God is not necessary. Therefore, God is a necessary condition.
Yeah, can you support
What
that?
about that
'Cause
is
the penny,
question begging.
the penny in my pocket is a necessary precondition for knowledge.
Can you support trans rights?
No, the penny in my pocket
Okay.
is a necessary precondition for knowledge, right?
And does this penny in your pocket,
right?
does this penny in your pocket have the same characteristics as God?
No, it's just a penny.
Okay, so then it can't be the necessary
Why
precondition for
not?
knowledge.
It simply is.
You're making a claim, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know why God is a necessary precondition for knowledge?
You haven't given an argument for that.
All right. So if I literally just did
What is it?
that, the disjunctive syllogism I just gave, right?
Your argument for why God is a necessary precondition for knowledge is that God is a necessary precondition for knowledge? That's called
No.
question begging. That's what
No.
I
Can
asked for.
you
a
repeat
non-question
back to
begging
me
argument.
my argument so I know you understand it?
Right. Your argument is to beg the question that God is necessary for the existence of knowledge. That's your argument.
That's literally not the argument. Can you steel man my argument or not? In which of my premises did I beg the question? Because both syllogisms were valid, right? If they beg the question, they're not valid.
Why
show
should
me
I
where it's not
accept
valid.
them, though? Why should I accept them? Why should
So
I
are you-
accept that
are you
God is a
moving the
necessary
goalpost now?
precondition?
It's up to you.
So it's not begging the question?
You've simply given an unsupported assertion.
Right. And we can move on, but if it's not begging the question, I just want you to admit that.
Oh,
that you were wrong.
we'll get there. I guarantee it eventually.
You said the argument I gave is begging the question.
It
I
will
gave the
be.
argument, and now you can't tell me why it's begging the question?
It gets. They always do get there.
Hold on. But you said, all right, let's say it gets there. You said the argument I gave is begging the question. So based off of the argument I gave, how is it begging the question?
What does presuppositionalism mean? It means
I
you
just want you to
presuppose
admit that the
presuppositionalism.
philosophical snobbery that you display is dishonest because you won't admit when you're wrong.
Presuppositionalism, right? Criticized by Dr. Craig, Bill.
So we're still moving past the point that the argument is not questionable.
Guilty of a logical howler in his
Wait,
words.
Who did you say?
Bill.
Dr. Craig something.
Dr. Craig.
Who's
Did you say William Lane Craig is a presuppositionalist?
No.
Yeah, I don't think William Lane Craig.
Listen again.
Yeah, he's not a TAG guy, right?
He goes with.
I haven't heard of this guy.
You have heard of William Lane Craig, right? And in his criticism of presuppositionalism, he says it's guilty of a logical howler, that of presupposing his conclusion, which is what you are, a presuppositionalist. Right? So do you have a non-question begging argument for God?
He makes a claim. You're making the same claim. Can you prove that claim?
Do you want me to quote?
No, I want you to show. You said based on the information I gave, which is my argument, that it was question begging. Now you're saying you need more information to determine whether or not it's question begging. So either you were lying or wrong.
Are you a presuppositionalist?
Can you answer my question without asking me a question?
You're a presuppositionalism.
No, just
simply
dishonest.
means begging the question. That's what presupposition is. It simply is begging the question.
So which part of my argument is begging the question?
Your first premise, where you assume
the first
and then
knowledge, you dummy.
Yeah. Can a premise alone be question begging?
I think she's talking about the first premise of the disjunctive syllogism. Is that?
Yeah.
So like basically what I can help out here, like what she's saying is that you can propose.
Wait, you guys are on the same team. Don't do. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
like,
nobody's team.
Like we're getting to like the limits of like my level of epistemology here, but we can go from we can operate from like a Platonist view or a nominalist view or some other type of view here.
It's going over my head, low key.
We're like right at my ceiling right there. I haven't explored.
I've only been reading philosophy.
I know that these terms exist, and I know that's like a on its level very basic rebuttal to that first premise. But
right,
like,
so
there are other options that are.
Well, are you familiar? Are you familiar with?
Can't be question begging.
Are you familiar with? Well, the argument is. Are you familiar with the Munchausen trilemma?
No, not at all.
You're not. So you're not.
No, we haven't discussed it at all.
Right?
We talked about that a lot during this debate.
I wasn't listening. There's three types of arguments.
No, you're good.
Presuppositionalism, infinitism, and foundationalism. You are a presuppositionalist. You beg the question. Infinitists believe in an infinite regress, and foundationalists assert a foundation. And which of those are you? You are the presuppositionalist. You beg the question. So you need to justify your logical fallacy, or else give me a non-question begging argument for God.
All right. So my argument begs the question, but you can't tell me how. You say one of the premises is begging the question, but a premise alone can't beg the question, because to beg the question is to say that the conclusion is found in the premise.
Yeah.
So again, how is my argument begging the question? You have not answered this.
Your first premise assumes that God exists.
No.
Can a premise alone be question begging?
No, but your first premise assumes that God exists, right?
No, but yes.
Do you not know? Do you not know how transcendental arguments work?
Sure.
Sure.
So explain to me your first premise. How do you justify it?
If necessarily X, or if possibly X necessarily Y.
Yeah, what is the justification for that?
X.
Why should I think that necessarily X implies Y?
Why should you think anything?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we have to have rules of inference, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
What rule of inference takes me from necessarily X to possibly Y?
No, if possibly X, necessarily Y.
Oh, okay. Possibly X, and from that I conclude necessarily Y.
Right.
Right. What is the rule that I follow to get there?
X.
That's not a rule, dude.
It's a rule.
You need an inference rule to get you from your first part to your second part. You need an inference rule. What is that rule?
X.
What?
X is the rule.
What is X
look,
in this
the
case?
first syllogism is modus ponens. That's the inference rule. The second syllogism is double negation elimination. That's the inference rule. Do inference rule justify arguments?
Modus ponens isn't an inference rule, you moron.
It's not?
No, it's an argument form. It's an argument form. It's not an inference.
All right, look it. Actually, instead of philosophical snobbery like you like to do when people don't understand things, I would just say you're wrong and you need to go study more.
Wait, that sounds like philosophical snobbery, what you just said.
That's what he said.
Well, all right. I did laugh, but it was, and
But you say
I'm
that
trying to give it back to Brenda a little bit, but you're right. I don't like it. I shouldn't do it.
Now, material implication, that's an inference rule. So how does material implication get me from possibly X to necessarily Y?
Where does knowledge come from?
Knowledge is a justified true belief.
No, it's not. Justified true belief is full of shit.
Isn't that what Alex's definition was earlier?
What is your
Jeff
definition
and Alex
of
disagree
knowledge?
on this
So
position.
you don't believe in the justified true belief. What is knowledge then?
Look at what the
What is
Gettier
it?
problems. It demonstrates that. Jake.
Yes, I understand, but I know about Gettier problems. But what is your definition of knowledge?
Here we'll pull something up.
Yeah. So while you do that, I have just a comment because I think I left for the last 20 minutes, so I don't know if we covered this, but I thought Duck was really onto something like really valuable in his critique of like accusing you guys of kind of doing apologism like dressed up as philosophy because I'm someone like I grew up like a really big math nerd, right? I'm a big math nerd, and I study computer science, so I've spent a lot of time with like formal logic. Like formal logic is arguably my career path. Right, like writing code is formal logic, like definitionally. And what I find frustrating about this, in contrast to that, is when I'm using structures in those fields, I feel like I'm gaining clarity as I navigate using those tools. Like those tools help me get clarity in like understanding what tools I'm working with. And here, it feels more like they're being used as kind of like a sleight of hand to avoid having to engage with the like philosophical question, like inquiries that people are trying to engage with. And I think that's when we talk about it being like kind of a sales tactic. It's like you guys kind of do this thing where you use this like aesthetic of logic in a way that substitutes like that weasels in the assertion of God to people who are really like curious about the nature of reality. And I'm almost done. I promise. I'm landing the plane. I swear. Like you're smuggling in God into this in a way that like people who are seeking out like an understanding of reality and are uncertain. You're asserting that people who have that uncertainty are lost and wrong, and we're all misguided, and you guys have the truth, and we can only understand the truth if we already accept your premises about God.
Where?
Hence question begging.
So there was a couple of things in there,
I
but
agree. There's a lot of question begging in that.
With a duck, right? I feel like it's, and I don't know if you were doing this, Ryan, to be honest, but it seems disingenuous to assume the motives of people when you don't know them. And again, I don't know if you did this, Ryan, because I think that even people who are sincerely wrong could have good intentions, right? So it's not like with Duck was saying is people are just trying to get you to come to church for whatever reason. He was just inferring nefarious reasons.
I mean, I don't know if it's nefarious or not. Like, I think that you want people to buy in to your particular religious views, and whether you intend to do this or not, or whether you're just echoing a tactic that someone else, indoctrinated you with, I feel like that's what you're doing. You're giving people a substitute for critical thinking, and like appealing to God.
Well, I would say there's some truth to that because we're all flawed humans, and sometimes we deceive ourselves. And even though our intentions are good, we actually have I debate because I want to be famous and make money.
Oh, I don't give a shit about any of that.
That's not an argument. Here. Can I have a point? One point
No, you can't. I was talking.
God
anyway.
Hold on, let him finish. Hold on, Manner, stop it. Let him finish.
Bro, he's been talking for the past 15 minutes and saying nothing.
Okay.
Just crashing the
I
panel.
don't care.
And
I
you're
don't
right.
care, Manor. You
Bring our
usually
blood
come on these
sports this year.
panels and you just spurg out.
I'm here to elevate the
And
conversation.
it's nonsense. You
We
elevate
can get to that.
nothing but my blood
You would be
pressure.
quiet.
Shut up, Manor.
I think you just need to wait your turn.
Typical Arab. Typical Arab.
Just give me a
Ryan
moment.
was
Okay, let's
making
not be like
after. Yeah, me and Ryan were having a discussion, a good one. Because I think there's some
I
truth
think
to what
we
he was
feel like
saying.
everyone else has like waited their turn for their shit.
Haji, calm down, Haji.
Spicoli.
Sorry.
It's not a bad word. Haji is not a bad word at all. It's just me.
Not a bad word,
His intentions of why he's saying it.
That's when you're in Palm Springs.
I mean, we
Not a
could
bad
debate
word.
slurs here, but that would be a really bad.
All right,
debate
go ahead
have.
to whoever.
My whole point
Everyone
was
say your
just
favorite
that-
slur.
My whole point was just that I think that can be true of anybody. And I think we all should be aware of that and really question why we do the things we do.
Would you teach your kid that?
Sure. Teach what exactly?
You would teach your kids that anyone can be misled, and so they might accidentally be doing brainwashing or apologetics when they're intending to do philosophy at that point.
Yeah, I mean, even on whatever issue you want to talk about, like,
Could you be misled?
Of course, everybody could be misled. Now,
Alex,
as
don't
far as
answer correctly because you want to talk, right? So make sure you answer him correctly. Don't fuck around.
all right, Manar, go ahead. What do you got? I'm sure it's not
Chat,
good.
you know
You wanna
what
talk,
to
right?
do to make me a happy tomato. Shut up,
Look,
Manor. Shut up. You know what? Let me do this for just a moment because sometimes mommy just has to have a little one-on-one with a child. Listen, Manure, every time you come on here, you come on and you spurg and you just get interruptive and you can't wait your turn. And you do all this dumb fuckery,
You
stupid
forgot I mogged
shit.
everyone else in the room. You forgot that.
You don't mog anything.
You don't think I'm mogging you?
Okay. Manure, sarcastic saint says, go to the back to change your adult diapers. You are all muscle and no brain. Show respect toward everyone on panel when you come back. Bye. Thank you, sarcastic saint, for
At least Saint knows.
Bro kind of reminds
sparing
me of Ziz for some reason.
He knew.
me
He knows what's good.
stupidity level.
Well,
My
I can do
God.
this shit. Oh yeah.
I think we
Muscles.
need the first debate sphere boxing match. Me and Manar.
Yes.
I want
Make
him
it
to do
happen,
one-on-one with
It
somebody.
wouldn't be the first time that's been attempted.
I
Yeah, all
want
you
to
guys-
watch. I want to watch Manure just get have his ass handed to him in the ring with all the shit talk he does. I would pay to watch somebody put him on his ass.
Hey, I do
You gotta host
MMA.
this,
I'll
Isn't
do it.
Andrew supposed to box Wick? Isn't that supposed to be a thing? Or did he?
I know that was like a thing, but it never came.
Supposed
never
to we
came to
need undercard
fruition,
fights?
so
I'll fight
I
somebody.
don't know.
But
And
I guess
just for the
to-
record,
Yeah.
before my apologies, chat, you have another goal that's running right now. You got 25 minutes, and I am getting tired. So
wow.
you
Yes,
might
so
want to
just
for a while.
kickstart that now.
just to engage with the response to my critique, right? Where you said that yeah, people could be doing this. I agree, but that's and it's definitely a thing to be concerned of. And I'm just asking, you right now, are you willing to engage and reflect on this in real time with us?
I'm not going to have a therapy session with you on Sarah's panel, but I think that self-deception is a real thing, and I think we're all susceptible to it.
Okay, but I guess when I'm at are you willing to engage with the fact that I think you're doing this right now intentionally or otherwise? Do you want to have a conversation about that, or would you prefer to avoid talking about that?
No, I think that's a question a discussion that you have with somebody who you're intimate with and who actually knows you and can really dig through layers of that. But I mean,
It just feels
everybody
it
should
just
have
feels
that.
hyper relevant to the debate topic.
Okay, so
I
because
think- I
you
think
think
Ryan
I'm
wants to
self-deceived,
relent
you want to have. I'm not interested in any of that. Thanks, though.
He's
I'm not
up
surprised.
because I asked him to. So.
What? I've been nothing but nice to you, Ryan. Why are you taking shots?
It's not a shot.
Yes, it is. I'm not surprised.
I'm just being real. Real recognize real, right?
All right. Well, you look gay, so we can get that out of the way.
I can live with that. Gay passing straight man. Many such
Oh
cases.
boy.
Let's go.
That's kind of weird because
We need more.
Nothing wrong with being gay. Nothing wrong with being gay.
rejection to me. It sounds
We
like
also need more straight passing gay people. Too.
2025, calling somebody gay is no big deal.
Spicoli,
Call
I
me
got a
gay.
question. I got a question for you. Is it gay if I have a beard and a mustache? I have both. Technically.
Well, did you know that having sex with a woman is
Gay if somebody takes a dick up your man.
Apologies for using that word, as some would be bigoted and interpret it as bad. But
having sex with a woman is gay.
Brenda, were you born with
only gays would have sex with a
Brenda,
woman.
were you born with a cock and ball?
Real men. Real men.
I mean,
Who the
we
fuck
could
said
have
that?
a debate on sex and
Brenda,
gender.
Who the fuck said that?
With other men.
Hey, who
Brenda.
said that? Was that you, G?
Were you born with a cock and ball?
Is that you that's fucking talking right now, bitch?
Yeah, I'm talking right now.
Shut the
What
fuck up.
of it?
Shut the
I
fuck
will.
up. What?
Did I address you at all? Did I say
You
duck?
just did. You just did,
Oh,
bitch.
Did I address you at all, or did I say
You're gonna be
Brenda?
on. You're gonna be up here
Brenda Duck?
misgendering
Is
someone.
your name Brenda Duck?
I don't give a
You know,
fuck,
you-
bitch. You're
Duck,
talking
Duck,
to me now.
About you
Step
guys.
into
You and
it.
him
What's
look
up?
alike.
You're just gonna put your
Duck,
head out.
Duck.
What's up?
Is this
what
What's
everybody
good?
was
Duck, you and
What's
Simon
good,
look
kid?
alike.
What's good, kid?
Don't they look
What's up?
alike? Don't fight. You look alike. You look like brothers.
up?
Don't fight each other. Kiss and make up. You guys
That's
look
a brother?
alike. You
That's a
guys
brother?
fucking look alike.
That's funny. That's funny.
Holy shit, they kind
Jared,
of
there's
do.
an opportunity here. You have a whole
got
roster.
jokes.
Of,
What the
like,
hell?
you can
You
do
look
this.
like him. You look like
I got
brothers.
jokes. What's up?
So are we going to
You're a
get?
funny guy. Let's go.
Yeah, you look like brothers.
So
You look more like brothers than me and my brothers did.
So the debate on sex and gender side, I think Brenda was trying to get somewhere.
I'm not trying to get anywhere with that. I really would like Alex to give me the proper full argument for why knowledge is impossible without God. More than just saying that it's not possible without God. The full
Can you
argument.
define knowledge real quick, just so we can all be on the same
would
page when
allow
he
me-
defines it?
That would the full argument that would allow me to assess it fairly.
So throughout the debate, I know you weren't here for that, so I understand. But you have watched me quite a bit, so I'm surprised that you don't
I have
know anything
not.
about.
I have not
I
watched
see you in my
much.
chat all the time, especially on Joel's stream.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's not watching you. That's just making snarky comments on YouTube, which everybody does.
Can I just ask Brenda real quick to just define knowledge to make sure he's on the same page as you when he explains it to you?
Knowledge is some kind of warranted belief or justified true belief. That's what knowledge is.
Okay.
yeah. So back to what I was saying. And again, this is late, and we just debated for 3 hours. But
I know. I apologize. I'm sorry.
it's all right.
I came in late and I didn't listen to the previous.
no, I'm not saying. I'm just saying. I'm
However,
But-
you're the expert here. You're the apologist. You know this shit. You should be able to give it boom, boom.
One day I
boom,
will
like
be an
that.
expert, but today is not that day. Anyway, the argument for why knowledge is not possible without God is because when you make a first order claim about knowledge, you implicitly make a second order claim. The second order claim is that knowledge exists. Without God, you're left with autonomous epistemology. So whenever you use the tools that you, whatever tools they are, say it's empiricism, when you use that to gain knowledge, and I ask you how you justify that, you end up in a circle that can't justify it. That's why without God, knowledge is impossible.
But how is God a guarantor of the truth?
Because of the literal syllogisms that I gave you earlier that you couldn't prove were begging the question.
But why couldn't I just do what I did, which is insert anything here, like the penny in my pocket, Allah, Kali, Wutan? I could just insert any name in there.
All right. So if a God who has created the world and sustains the world has created you and your senses to know the world and to know him, would it make sense that your senses are generally reliable?
I'm pretty sure my senses are
That's not the question
reliable.
I asked. That's
They're
not the question I asked.
But they're not reliable. Why would they be? Why
Okay.
would it
All right,
follow?
perfect.
Why
Perfect.
would it follow?
I can go with
why would
that.
it follow- No, why would it follow that because God created me, that my senses are reliable?
You're saying that wouldn't follow if God created you.
What's the logical connective there?
Because if God created you with a purpose to know the world, and he gave you the senses that you're using to know the world and to know him, it would follow that your senses are generally reliable.
With the purpose to know the world. How do I know that? That's just begging the question all over again.
Scott Terry adds in towards you, Brenda, with the Big Ten and says, while he disagrees with our method, William Lane Craig has said many positive things about presuppositionalism. Brenda hasn't been coached about those citations, however. Do you have any thoughts to add?
I know about his comments with regard to William Frame. So I do know about that.
I think because you're saying that presuppositionalism is like kind of shouldn't be a thing, right?
Right, because it commits a logical howler, in the words of William Lane Craig. Craig went on to talk about saying that there was something there that Frame, he mentions Frame, an apologist, a theologian, right? I don't think that gets us out of the problem with it being question begging. So there.
I think
nice try, Scott. Too bad you failed.
Scott says no, he doesn't. So I think Scott has a very big disagreement with you.
No, who doesn't what?
And Brenda, she can also debate.
William Lane Craig specifically calls out presuppositionalism as committing a logical howler. He says, however, there's the element of an argument that could be developed here, and he talks about Frame, the theologian, right? That isn't going to get you out of the problem, which is you're begging the question, as Alex just proved, right? When he added, right, that God needs to create you with the purpose of discovering the truth, that's begging the question. You snuck it in there in your premise, because before that you didn't say that God created me with the purpose of discovering knowing the truth. You simply said that he created me. Simply creation of me, simplicator, doesn't mean that I am made to discover the truth.
I asked you a hypothetical. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I wanted to follow up with what Scott, because Scott is having the argument and saying that Brenda only knows about that one essay in the 5 Views book, but Craig talks about presuppositionalism in many other venues.
In any of those cases, do we get to the part where we are surmounting the problem of a fallacious begging the question argument?
No, I asked you a hypothetical question to test your honesty.
What was the question?
If God created us with purpose, right, to know him and to know the world, to take dominion over the world specifically, would it follow that our senses would be generally reliable?
No, it doesn't follow. What you are saying, the premise you're saying.
I'm not debating you, Manar. We need to box.
Alex,
You're insufferable.
Are you crazy?
He's back.
Before you do the 1-2, you would be looking for your
goodness.
Manner. Before you do 1-2, you would be done.
Wait, Manner.
This message is sponsored in part by...
And just a quick palate cleanser.
Just to embarrass religious people.
You're screeching, dude.
Oh my God.
Can we get him to do a one-on-one one day?
Hold on. Let me just address the chat. Chat, you have 4 more super chats to hit in only 15 minutes to do it. Manner is an easy target if you want to spend your $5 wisely and make me a happy tomato. And you could just, send 4 or $5 super chats and
I want to.
I don't want to debate Sarah. I'm going to leave. Don't send the super chat. I don't want Sarah to make any money from me. Alex, you're a shit debater. You embarrass me.
I'm just going to go ahead and buy. Just not
Alex,
worth it. It's just he sits there and let me just take a moment to just say, like, he sits there and he spurgs in the chat. He spurgs when he gets on here. And then he says, like, Sarah won't host me for a debate. So blah, blah. I'm like, I wonder what you have no respect to the panel. You have no respect to, like, the host, like you come on and you just start yelling randomly, and it's fucking obnoxious. So, anyways,
To respond to Crown, I am actually very scared of Manara. He has 2 microphones. I don't know. That shit is illogical.
It is
It's
funny.
scary.
He's holding the mic he's talking into with the mic.
Yeah.
That is aura.
He does have a point, however. It doesn't follow that simply because God created me to know him, it doesn't follow that my senses would be accurate. Perhaps I have a sensus divinitus that infallibly leads me to knowledge of God.
That has nothing to do with my hypothetical.
Did you understand what I just said, though?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with my hypothetical.
So would a sensus divinitus be possible for God?
So even if that were the case, it wouldn't make what I said not follow.
Well, how
Just because
does it
there
follow?
could be some other way.
Yeah. Therefore, why should I pick one or the other?
Because it's part of the hypothetical, Brenda. Now,
You're
the
begging the
reason
question. It's true because
the reason reason I gave you the hypothetical is because you asked about the penny in your pocket. Did the penny in my pocket create me? And did it create me with a purpose in order to know God, it in the world?
It is the foundation of all
right.
potency
So
and
now you're
contingency.
replacing the penny with God, which proves my point. You need God. God is a necessary precondition for knowledge. Thanks for playing, Brenda.
It's called
You
it's called reductio.
At first, it was just a penny. Now it's God.
So, Alex, can I ask you a question? Wi-Fi, I got a question. So, doesn't this conflict with how our intuition normally works, where I might feel like I can have knowledge of, something I'm holding in my hand or something I did last week, something I read on the internet, if it's like a reliable source, axioms, and, if we extend this to like formal languages, like obviously it's a really different discipline, but there's very different bottoms, if you're digging a hole. And so, it's just, I'm wondering is it evidence if presuppositionalism falls so far outside of how we normally think of knowledge, shouldn't that be a cast a doubt on what presuppositionalism is actually for, what it is?
Well, I think that you misunderstand. I've already granted first order knowledge. So like your intuition that you have knowledge based on empiricism is true. I would agree to that. The problem is not in the first order. It's in the second order.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm saying that I can know something modally, or if I wanted to say, I know
Modally is an intuition.
Or like another way, sure, just like pulling something out here. I can pull out my C.S. Lewis books and stuff like this, and say that like, yeah, if I've read these 100 times, I know what the stories are about. I can tell you essentially what this specific particular book is, just like I can tell you maybe what like a category or whatever a class of objects that our books are like, those. And so presuppositionalism doesn't say anything about that. It says in fact that forms of presuppositionalism in apologetics, like what you and G have been arguing for, trying to kind of I'm just trying to find like a common ground or something like this. Like if my cousin gives me another book, I know my cousins are both, like my cousin's books are definitely like still books, right? I feel like I can say I know that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't. So I don't know what the disagreement is.
Well, it was an accusation towards you.
Yeah.
Though.
Okay. It seems to me like you're saying it's philosophically complex and not intuitional, like the fact that someone who knows nothing about philosophy can walk down the street and know that they're walking down the street, right? Is that fair?
I don't think you can.
Well, Scott follows up to say, why does Brenda think Christians have to offer an argument for God's existence when presuppositionalists are very explicit in our belief that unbelievers already know God exists?
Do you want me to reply to that, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, he's simply begging the question that the presuppositionalist claim is true.
If I may kind of interject and try to kind of steelman their position here, I think their foundation just is God itself. Am I right? It's not really begging the question from their perspective just because God is that very foundation. Do I have that about
They're
right?
not foundationalists. They're not foundationalists.
Yeah,
they engage in circular reasoning. God is true because God is true.
No.
Have I ever made that argument, Brenda?
Either one of us make that argument, Brenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know,
but that's
it's
what
the condensed version. What is it that makes God?
Can you show me in my syllogisms where I make that argument?
What
Brenda?
is it? What is it that makes God true?
The syllogisms I've given you already, those ones?
The syllogisms make him true? Make it true?
No,
No, hold on. Wi-Fi, I'll get this.
Yeah,
The intelligibility of the universe.
What?
The intelligibility of the universe.
Well,
you think the universe is intelligible?
Yeah, it has to
is
be.
It? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be?
See, this is.
I am not convinced.
Yeah.
This
is epistemic nihilism.
All of our scientific knowledge.
Scientific. Oh, hold on. Wait. What's science, bro?
Yeah.
All of our scientific knowledge and belief could be wrong.
Unintelligible.
So we're
it
just
could be wrong,
so,
right?
Oh, so science is fucked? Are you a scientist?
Science is not doesn't give you a deductive certainty.
I can tell you one thing that is solid and true is you have 7 more minutes to get in 3 more of those super chats, or I will truly just shut down and go to bed.
So
to
science
kind of build off.
Science can't prove its hypotheses true. It can only prove that they're probable. To the best,
if we go to what you said earlier about
it's an inference to the best explanation. They could be false. Every single thing we say about the universe could be wrong.
Brenda, are you using reasoning right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you get to reasoning?
Humans discovered reasoning.
Okay. So if humans change what reasoning is, does reasoning change?
Yes, it has changed historically over the years.
Changed, so we can just willy-nilly change the laws of logic? Are you sure about that?
There are no laws of logic, dude.
Yes, there are.
No, what are they?
Brenda,
Brian,
what kind of
Brian, I'm going to call on you when he gets done.
I can't recite them.
Answer to this.
There's no laws of logic, Ryan. They're
I mean, they're like laws of logic are kind of like frameworks for interpreting, engaging with logical claims. They're not like real like.
Can I have different frameworks?
Formal systems are based on axiomatic principles.
They're like theorems.
Presuppose is true. Yes, 1 + 1 = 2 is a theorem.
Yeah.
Yes.
What makes theorems true?
Can I have different laws of logic?
I think you
Not
do.
only can you, many people have created them.
Laws of logic.
Can I explain something? Let me explain something. I have an important point. I have a point.
Isn't there a law of
It's important because when you have, give me a second. When there's a difference, there's a big difference when you have formal laws of logic. You can talk about laws, natural laws, and using induction. When we're talking about axiomatic thinking, we're talking about a square going into a square hole. We're talking that you're using logic. You're already at the bottom of it. You can't dig under it. There's nothing else. It's just a logical system. And so just be clear when you're talking about what logic is supposed to be, that a presupposition is about an axiom. It's about this thing that you're not supposed to be able to get any further underneath or under. It's not like corruptible.
What grounds that?
Axioms are not justified.
Grounds it?
They are axioms are assumed.
See, Brenda agrees with me here. They're not.
Has logic ever changed?
Yes.
It's a good question.
People use different systems of logic.
Before this panel potentially ends, Brenda and Duck, I'd love to talk to you two later on, sometime in the future, because I'm actually really interested in this idea, outside of classical theories on the laws of logic. That stuff seems interesting.
If I could zoom out just briefly, there was a specific outline or the syllogism you gave earlier, or I think initially, if knowledge is possible then the existence of God is knowable. That was like the core thing. I don't know if you guys got into this, but like that does. I feel like that doesn't even follow alone, because like even if some knowledge is possible, that doesn't mean that all knowledge is possible or is knowable, right?
How's it?
Yeah, I don't like when all knowledge you mean like everything that there is to know.
Yeah, like for example, the existence of God.
Well, I'm not saying that everybody I could know everything because God exists.
Well, maybe
I'm not understanding.
Well, your syllogism was specifically number one: if knowledge is possible, then the existence of God is knowable, right? And that's what I'm challenging that alone. And then your second, like the way you built that up, the modus ponens or whatever, is knowledge is possible, therefore the existence of God is knowable. But I'm saying that alone doesn't follow, because just there being some knowledge that is possible doesn't mean that all knowledge is knowable.
Right. I'm not making the claim that all knowledge is knowable. I'm making the claim that if there is even one thing that is possible to know, right, then God must exist, because based on the disjunctive syllogism, a worldview without God would not be able to justify how knowledge exists.
And can you elaborate on what you mean there by the disjunctive syllogism? Yeah,
I could give it again. The disjunctive syllogism is for when someone asks, how do you know P1 is true, right? Either God is a necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge or not. It is not the case that God is not necessary. Therefore, God is a necessary condition. It follows the double negation elimination inference rule, which is valid.
But
yeah, so this I think is where people would accuse you of begging the question.
Yes, you need to give an argument.
I brought this up too.
You guys, to the chat, you have 2 minutes. All you need is 3 $5 super chats, 3 donations.
Let's just assume.
Well, I'll help you out. Somebody can boot me because my rice is done. So I could.
Yeah, Brenda, hold on, I got you. Let me see if I can throw that in there.
So let's just assume for a second that there's not a God. Right? Where does knowledge come from?
Who are you asking, me or who?
Anyone. Brenda was the one.
Where does knowledge
Can you
come
be a little more good faith and like maybe clarify what you mean a little bit? Because it's like asking like, well, it makes sense for most people to say, well, how do you know the Big Bang exists? But can you understand what I'm saying when like you ask a question like this and you say, well, where does knowledge come from?
Knowledge is a
product. I don't understand the beatdown what's the beatdown? What is the beatdown like that you're trying to do? I think maybe that's my problem with
it. It's not a beatdown, bro.
Well, I know that, but it seems like that's what you're trying. That's kind of what you're going for.
The problem with the question is that you're assuming that knowledge exists.
Oh, so you're saying it doesn't?
Do you think knowledge is like a substance that is extruded?
It has to be 5 and up.
Comes from someplace?
Show me. Put it in my hand.
Is knowledge a substance that gets extruded?
Put it in my hand.
Abstract.
For me, it's this simple.
It's just a product of my having a justification for my beliefs. That's it.
There's no favors here, buddy.
Beliefs.
I don't give a shit, though.
It's a product of the mind.
Well,
it's
I know
an
you don't
idea.
give a shit, but I'm trying to fucking lift you up, bro. You're looking like an asshole on the internet.
I don't give a fuck if I look like an asshole,
bro. For the umpteenth time, you look like an asshole.
I don't give a fuck.
Fix you.
I don't give a fuck.
I think I like to.
Why are you wearing a branded hat?
Hey,
Why are you wearing a branded hat if you don't give a fuck? I'm trying to fix it.
A long time ago, in a YouTube world full of keyboard warriors, many monsters and trolls lurked in the chat rooms. They thrived on arguments amongst each other until one day, a heroine rose from the ashes. She was made from the tears of beta bitches and the sweat of alpha male gym guys. Throughout the centuries, this keyboard warrior princess showed up in many forms. She slayed many demons along the way. By the light of the moon, she led the simp army into battle. Wielding her sword, she fought through the dark forests. With each new era, the monsters evolved. The keyboard warrior princess grew stronger, with new skills to bring them down. The world around her advanced, but so did she. Her heroism became known to society as technology advanced. And with each new generation, She had to learn how to blend in to keep her identity hidden. Now known as the Raging Tomato, this keyboard warrior princess fights for justice in every debate. She fights for freedom, for moderator bias, and she fights for your ability to battle on an open panel for your beliefs. She protects the simp troopers from destruction. She fights to create peace among troll wars. She storms the battle zones without hesitation and leaves the battleground with her pockets full of souls. Are you ready to battle your fellow trolls? Are you ready for a moderator to give you time to talk? Are you ready for justice, peace, and a fair fight? Tune in every Monday night to watch your friends duke out their issues, or join the open panel so that you can fight the good fight and find resolution with your peers.